Seiichi was a constipated loser high schooler who smelled like an anime convention all day long, causing him to be bullied. Even after being isekai'd, he was still a pathetic loser until he stole a fruit that gave him a cheat leveling ability, making him so overpowered that his riz attracted all kinds of creatures. One day while at school, Seiichi was being bullied by his classmates once again when they heard a voice claiming to be God. God told them to form groups and make sure they stayed together, because he was going to transport them to an isekai world as heroes. He gives each student a different skill and an ability to read others' statuses. When Seiichi's status was checked by a fellow classmate, he had the lowest stats and his race was even stated as barely human. This made them mock him and revealed they would never allow a useless piece of garbage in their group. Everyone except for Seiichi was transported as his classmates didn't want to be paired with the fatso, so he was left behind. However, God noticed he was still there, and when he realized that he was the unwanted loser, he gave Seiichi an extra special skill and transported him as well. Alone and hungry after spending 5 days in a forest, Seiichi was still pulling a massive gaslighting and deluding himself into thinking he was the main character who will somehow level up without doing shit. He was so hungry that he tried to eat a worm he saw crawling on the ground, but before he could pick it up, something jumped out of the bushes and stepped on him. As he lay on the ground, he saw a fruit and immediately picked it up. He appraised it and discovered it was called Fruit of Evolution, but it had no additional information on it. Seiichi quickly ate the horribly tasting fruit thinking he'll be transformed into a Riz Lord. However, he then heard a voice prompting him to activate the fruit. Startled, he wondered what the voice was and what it meant. But when nothing happened, he got up and went in search of more food. He came across a group of monkeys, and when he checked their stats, he discovered they were level 120 monkeys with higher IQ than him.
Emotional, damn it!
And this made him feel insulted that monkeys were above him. As he watched them and wondered what they were up to, the monkeys soon left, and he immediately went to pick up the fruits they left behind. He put them in his item box and noticed the bottles that were there. Using his appraisal skill, he discovered they were high-grade recovery potions, so he wasted no time in stealing them too. In a town somewhere, the other students that had been transported stood talking. A group approached Kanazuki, Seiichi's senior from school, and asked where Seiichi was, but she told them that he had been transported to a different location, and they wondered if he was doing okay. Meanwhile, Seiichi was about to eat a mushroom he had found, but it had no information on it. However, the idiot still ate it and immediately fell to the ground in pain. And even though he was about to die, Seiichi decided to die eating. He ate the remaining Fruit of Evolution he had and immediately he felt better. He had also acquired poison resistance and his rank increased. But before he could celebrate his rank increment, he was attacked by a clever monkey. It managed to injure him and he immediately drank one of the recovery potions he stole. Seiichi stood up and tried to challenge the monkey, but since he was only as strong as an NPC, he was once again beaten up. Before the monkey could eat him, it took a whiff of his natural garbage-smelling cologne and died. The monkey's remains turned into items and he acquired new skills from them. Among the items was a book about clever monkeys, and Seiichi was surprised he could read the book as it was written in a language he had never seen before. It was then he realized that the special skill he had been given was the reason he could read the book. Just then, the voice informed him that evolution had commenced. He had no idea what was going on, but he was in extreme pain. When the pain subsided, he got up and realized he was not only thinner, but his stats had increased incredibly. However, he soon learned that he hadn't completed his evolution and would still go through the pain at least 9 more times. He was however pissed because he was still at level 1, even though he had defeated a level 120 cleaver monkey. Seiichi had spent 5 months in the forest and had since been able to utilize the knowledge he had gotten from the clever monkey to survive. He defeated a level 311 acrowolf and acquired new skills as well as a legendary water spirit's dagger. He picked up the book containing the acrowolf knowledge and saw a spot that was hidden on the map, which made him remember that it was the same way on the clever monkey book and decided to check it out later. He immediately went through another evolution, and when it was over, he wondered what would happen when he went through the final evolution. As he lay wondering about the final evolution, he realized that he was surrounded by clever monkeys. Before he could react, a big red ugly-ass gorilla with a pink flower on its head fell from the sky and demanded Seiichi fight it. Even though he had gotten stronger, he was still a very big coward and fearfully asked if he could decline. But the gorilla refused. It assured him that the monkeys won't interfere with the fight, and Seiichi feared for his life because it was at level 700. When the gorilla threw a punch, Seiichi dodged it and was shocked by how strong it was while also noticing the gorilla giving him some serious lovey-dovey eyes. It was saying how much it loved strong men. And that was when Seiichi realized it was actually a she, and he was disgusted by the fact that his Riz could only attract gorillas. He used a slash attack, which the gorilla easily dodged, and it threw a punch at him, which he wasn't able to dodge, and was sent flying across the forest. The gorilla was so impressed by the fact that her flash fist didn't kill him and said she wanted him since Seiichi was exactly her spec. However, he made it clear he wasn't interested in a gorilla, but she still introduced herself as Saria, while trying to act all cute and shy. He asked why an ugly gorilla had the name of a pretty girl, and all Saria heard was that she was pretty. Still disgusted, he used the adamant claw skill he had gotten from the Acrowolf to attack her, but she easily jumped out of the way and flew up. She used air thrust and came down on him like a nuclear missile. Seiichi dodged it and hoped that the gorilla had taken itself out by doing that, but she stood up and expressed her joy at him being able to dodge her attack. Seiichi then used the water spirit's dagger to amplify his water magic. Raising his hand above his head, he used a skill called Fall Disaster that would unleash a lot of water on his opponent. However, since he was as dumb as a doorknob, he didn't direct the water at Saria and was instead hit by his own attack. Dripping wet, he tried to cover up his own stupidity by acting cool and telling Saria she was good. However, she immediately told him that she had nothing to do with what had happened, and he was embarrassed that a gorilla had called him out on his foolishness. She didn't give him time to recover as she used Flash Fist to beat the shit out of him. Seiichi's miserable life flashed before his eyes, and as a last resort, he unleashed his body odor, which had now become a skill called Stench Performer. Instead of killing her like it had done to the clever monkey, Saria declared her love for him and asked him to marry her. At Saria's house, Seiichi demanded she let him go, but Saria told him that he was her husband, and he had to stay with her. Seiichi pointed out that she was a Dan gorilla, and he was a human, so there was no way they could be married. Instead of responding, she told him to eat, and when he took a bite he was surprised by how delicious it was. Saria revealed she had made new clothes for him, and Seiichi was a few seconds away from losing his mind, because he couldn't understand why a gorilla was giving wife material. She then asked if that made her a good bride, and he said yes, if she married a gorilla, but she insisted that they got married. He asked her how she was able to talk, and she told him she had found some books in a cave and read them. She showed him the books, and while reading them, he instantly acquired the skills. While he watched Saria catch fish, Seiichi plotted his escape, but before he could make it far, he came face to face with a giant spider and screamed out like a little bitch. Saria immediately came to his rescue and punched it, sending it flying across the sky. She asked a shaken Seiichi if he was okay, and he told her yes, but he was surprised by how worried she was about him, which made him realize he'd been a shallow prick for judging her based on appearance. While they ate, Saria told Seiichi that she and the clever monkeys would go out to gather the fruit of evolution. She asked if he knew what it was, and he immediately said no, even though he had stolen the ones she had previously gathered from the clever monkeys. She told him that eating 10 of the fruit would let one become overpowered. However, eating 11 would kill you. She also mentioned that she herself had already eaten 10, but someone had stolen the ones she had gathered to give to her future husband. Seiichi got scared when she said she'd kill the thief that stole them, so he immediately begged for his life, admitting that he was the one that stole them. She forgave but said since he'd eaten them, they were getting married. The look on his face made Saria ask if he hated her, and he said no, which immediately made her pull up dressed as a bride and begged him to get married. Saria soon left to go hunting, and Seiichi used it as an opportunity to escape. Meanwhile, at another place, Seiichi's classmates are training. Kanazuki and her friends recalled that they had been tasked with defeating the demon lord by the king on the day they had arrived. Back in the forest, Seiichi was running away from Saria, who discovered he was missing. He came across a cave with an intimidating aura, but ran inside when he heard Saria's voice close by. Inside the cave, he opened a door and entered a room where he saw a skeleton with glowing red eyes seated on a throne. The skeleton was impressed that he had been able to reach his room and believed he had to be strong to have managed that. Seiichi, on the other hand, saw him as dangerous and decided to check his stats, which revealed that he was the Dark Lord Xenos and was at level 1. He was relieved because he could easily take him on, but Xenos told him to look again, which he did. It turned out that he had tricked him and was actually at level 1500. He told Seiichi that he had thought the first person to enter into his room would be a strong person, but instead a cannon fodder loser with NPC energy had walked in. He then tried to stab Seiichi, but Saria got in the way and was stabbed instead. Seiichi called out her name, which made her happy that he had called her name for the first time since they met. He tried to give her recovery potions, but she said it was no use since she was already dead. She explained that she was still able to speak to him because of her skill called Kaiser Majesty, which kept her going for a while. Seiichi bawled his eyes out apologizing for how he had treated her, but she told him not to worry and asked him to smile as her last request. Meanwhile, Xenos, who stood back watching their emotional farewell, found the whole thing ridiculous. Seiichi told him to shut his web-infested mouth because he didn't understand them. Making it the first time in his pathetic life, he bravely stood up to someone. He'd attacked Xenos, who easily blocked his attacks. And while they fought, Seiichi told him how wonderful Saria had been. Xenos was surprised by his outburst and asked if he actually had feelings for a freaking gorilla, and Seiichi declared that he loved Saria. Seiichi then used Ocean Impact and, actually using his brain this time around, directed its flow at Xenos, who used a skill called Magic Hole to trap the water. He told Seiichi to give up, saying a weakling like him could never defeat him. However, he refused, claiming that he hadn't accepted Saria's feelings for him. So, fueled by the great power of love and using his skill of instant movement, he attacked a surprised Xenos and stabbed him. Xenos accepted his defeat and thanked Seiichi for showing him true love. But before he disappeared, Seiichi saw a young woman appear and hug him. As they hugged, he told her he was going to protect her this time around. Seiichi watched them disappear, but soon remembered Saria and ran to her. She too had started to disappear, but he kissed her right before she disappeared. A bright light shone, and lying where Saria had been before was a beautiful girl with red hair and a pink flower in her hair. Seiichi was so surprised when she got up and ran to hug him that he had a serious nosebleed. He was so shocked when he realized that she was Saria. Seiichi read Xenos' story and learned that he had been a Nobel 1500 years ago, but was betrayed by his wife and the Emperor. The only person who stood by him was his maid Maria, who loved him, but she died after she sacrificed herself to save him. After her death, he became a vengeful monster and spent his days alone in the cave. Moved by their story, Seiichi told Saria that he was glad he was able to reunite the two again. Soon after, Seiichi's final evolution began, and when it was over, he became even more handsome, but still ugly compared to Gojo Satoru. He told Saria that he wanted to leave the forest, and she said she'd go anywhere with him. Just then, a little sheep appeared and introduced himself as Miss Sheep, the dungeon administrator. He claimed he had come because they were the first to clear the dungeon, and Seiichi pointed out that he was a bit late, so he admitted that he got held up because he was enjoying Seiichi's suffering as he went through his final evolution. He then went ahead to give Seiichi the rewards for clearing the dungeon, which were a Fruit of Evolution cultivation set and a 10-day travel set. He also gave Saria a dress and Seiichi a helmet before he transported them out of the forest, which allowed them to begin their journey. Seiichi and Saria decide to head to the nearest town and register at the Adventurers Guild to get their IDs, but on the way they encounter a level 88 slime. However, Seiichi easily defeated it and realized he had become overpowered. Among the items that dropped was a pair of boots, which he gave them some skill cards that allowed him to level up. Seiichi wasn't happy about leveling up because he felt he was becoming a monster, and he didn't like it. When he took off his helmet, it turned into a robe, and Saria handed him the note that fell out of it. It was a letter from Miss Sheep, and in it he explained that the helmet changed because Seiichi had leveled up and the robe will conceal his true strength from others. At the town gate, Seiichi lied that he and Saria had lost their IDs. So the guard there asked them to touch the Gem of Truth to determine their criminal status before he could let them enter. Once they did, he allowed them pass through and warned them to be careful of the guild when they told him of their plan to register there. He then introduced himself as Claude and asked them to come to him if they needed any help. At the guild, Seiichi thought Claude was probably exaggerating when he opened the door and saw a blonde woman pulling a 50 Shades of Grey right in front of everyone. He immediately shut the door as he didn't believe what he'd just seen. He opened it again, and this time she was pouring candle wax on a man. Looking around, he saw more weird-ass people, and he quickly realized it was a hentai fest and told Saria they should leave. However, before they could leave, they were stopped by the guild master, who was dressed in only Speedos. He introduced himself as Gussel Clute, and Seiichi thought he was an airhead who only had interest in his muscles. He flexed his muscles in their face and strategically pushed them into the building. Inside, he called the attention of the blonde woman, who immediately changed her outfit and introduced herself as Eris McLean, the receptionist. She told him that their guild collected information from around the world, and if he signed up with them, he'd have access to them. Seiichi recalled his friends, and Saria told him it would be a good idea to join the guild. As they finished their registration, 3 Viking wanteds with mohawks came in and asked Seiichi to come with them. They took him to the back of the building, and when they took off his robe, they were shocked because he was so handsome. Seiichi was caught off guard when he saw their leader had stripped, and was even more shocked when they told him that it was their welcome party for him. Men didn't want anything to do with sus people, so he made a run for it to protect his virgin ass. but they went after him. They tried to convince him that he'd loved the experience, but he didn't listen and ran faster. Impressed by his speed, they said he was the man they were looking for, but they couldn't keep up with him, so they eventually stopped chasing him. Seiichi managed to get back to the guild, and Gussel said he was surprised he had made it back. Eris told him that he was the first person to make it back alive. Eris told the couple that they needed to pass some tests before joining the guild officially. Gussel explained that they needed someone who was at least a B-rank adventurer to supervise them for the tests and introduce them to Artoria, an A-rank baddie adventurer. Seiichi was only focused on her massive plots and didn't hear a word she said, so Seria had to call him to order. Artoria wasn't pleased with the idea, and when she complained, Gussel told her that since he survived the Mohawks, he could survive her. She finally accepted and apologized for her rude behavior. While heading to their first test, Artoria told them that they would start with odd jobs. The first was helping out at an orphanage, and Seria volunteered to do it. While on their way to the second job, Artoria helped a kid who had gotten injured while playing. As she tended to his injured leg, the rope holding some wooden planks together came loose, but before Seiichi could get to them, it fell on top of them. When he got closer, he saw that Artoria had managed to stop it using a defense skill and wondered if she had known it would fall. The second quest was to demolish a building, and while Artoria was trying to explain how they would do the job, Seiichi walked into the building and, forgetting he was extremely overpowered, pushed a single brick, making the entire house fall on him. Artoria screamed in surprise, thinking he was hurt, and ran to look for him. While she looked for him, she blamed herself for what happened because everyone around her always got hurt, and that was why she was called Artoria the Calamity. As she cried, Seiichi came out from under the rubble, and as soon as she saw him, she called him a brainless idiot while scolding him for acting carelessly. She told him that as an adventurer he needed to be able to sense danger and be careful, saying that his stupidity would cost his team their lives. Seiichi then apologized, and they went on to the next quest. As Seiichi's classmates trained, their instructor Zakia watched them from a balcony with another knight. He told the knight that he was against sending them to fight against the demon lord, because the war had nothing to do with them. He also admitted he was against the war with the demons completely, and said he would do everything he could to protect them. Back at the village, Artoria informed Seiichi that the final task was to walk a dog. Seiichi thought it would be a piece of cake until he saw that the dog was actually a wolf. The wolf chased him around the garden while its owner and Artoria stood watching. The owner pointed out that Artoria seemed happier and hinted that it was because of Seiichi, but she immediately denied it, even though her face was as red as a tomato. With the quest completed, they returned to the guild, and Gussel pulled out their reward from his speedos, like it was the most natural thing to do. Eris asked if they had a place to stay, and when they said no, Artoria told them that they could stay at the inn she was staying at. Eris and Gussel were surprised because it wasn't like her to do something like that. Artoria got embarrassed, and before she could withdraw the offer, Seiichi and Seria agreed. Soon Seiichi, Seria, and Artoria went to a field to do another test. Artoria explained that all they had to do was gather up 10 medicinal herbs and they would be done. Seiichi immediately ran off without listening to everything she had to say, and Artoria just smiled as she watched Seria go after him. Seria handed over the herbs she had picked to Artoria, who praised her, but when it was Seiichi's turn, he handed over mana mushrooms. Artoria asked where the herbs were, and he said he hadn't seen any, causing her to express how shocked she was that someone could be so dumb and airheaded that he didn't notice the herbs growing next to his feet. He picked them and gave them to her, but she said they weren't enough, and once again he ran off into the forest in search of what was right in front of him. As he wondered why he could only find rare herbs, he heard some people talking, but since he didn't know how to mind his own business, he went to see who they were. He couldn't hear what they were talking about, so he decided to go ask them if they knew where he could find the herbs he was looking for. It turned out they were demons under the command of Leah, the captain of the 3rd Division of the Demon Lord's army. Seiichi just thought of them as weirdos and tried to leave, but they stopped him because they didn't want him spoiling their plan since he'd seen them, and they assumed he also heard their plan. They summoned an ugly-ass troll which used its giant club to hit Seiichi, but he stopped it using his absorb skill that transferred his opponent's strength to him. Scared shitless, the cowardly demons ran off, so Seiichi had no other choice but to return to Artoria and Seria with the rare herbs he found. In the end, Artoria ended up giving him the herbs she had since he looked so helpless. Back in the demon realm, Leah questioned the demon squad that had run from Seiichi. They admitted that they had gone to the human realm to set up teleportation traps so they could reduce the human army before they had a chance to fight. She asked where the traps would send them to, and they told her that it would take them to the dungeon of the Black Dragon God. Leah said she felt bad for the humans who had fallen in the trap, but told them they needed to be punished for their disobedience. They ran away when she mentioned they would be lashed 500 times each. Meanwhile, in the human realm, while waiting for Artoria so they could begin their final test, Seiichi and Saria met Claude, the night they had met at the town's gate when they first arrived. He asked them to keep being nice to Artoria, even after their tests were done, and just then, Artoria joined them asking if they knew each other. Claude just told her she had met good people. He then asked if it was their final test and wished them luck before they left. The final test was to defeat 10 slimes, so Artoria asked Saria what weapons she would use, but she said her fists were enough. Artoria wasn't convinced, but said she'd watch and see what happened. The test began, and just as Seiichi was about to slash a slime, it disappeared. Artoria checked out the area and realized that there were teleportation spells set up all over the area. She told them that the test was on hold, and while she instructed them to return to the town, she accidentally stepped in one of the traps. Seiichi and Saria quickly grabbed onto her, and all three of them were teleported to the dungeon. The dragon felt their presence immediately. They were transported into the dungeon and was immediately enraged. Since they had no idea where they were or how to get back, Artoria suggested they find a way out. She then asked why they had followed her while scolding them for neglecting the use of their brains. Seiichi told her that his body had reacted before he could think, and Saria said she had just wanted to help her. Moved by their determination, Artoria forgave them and handed a guide stone to Seiichi. She said it would lead whoever had it to any missing member of their party, and if the person was in danger, it would glow red. As soon as she told them to stick together and not get separated, Artoria accidentally stepped on a trap and set it off. A stone wall rose and separated her from them, and when she tried calling out to them, it was pointless as they couldn't hear her, so she tried to find another way to rejoin them. On the other side of the wall, Seiichi was freaking out because they got separated and tried to use his fists to break down the wall, thinking he was the Saitama. Saria showed him the Gid stone. She said they could use it to track Artoria, but unfortunately none of them knew how to use it. Seiichi asked it to show the way, and surprisingly it moved and flew towards the stone wall that had separated them in the first place. Saria then suggested they take the path behind them and find another path to her. Artoria was fighting off a mummy who threw her against the wall with so much force, causing her to cough out blood, but she managed to get back up and slashed it in two. With the mummy defeated, she looked like she'd been through a lot and sat exhausted on the floor while she hoped Seiichi and Saria were okay. Meanwhile, Seiichi and Saria kept walking into dead ends, and just before he could lose his shit and pop off, Saria called him into a room where she had found a large treasure chest. Seiichi did the smartest thing he'd ever done since entering the dungeon and walked away, and when Saria asked why, he said it looks suspicious. While they talked, the chest demanded they open it, and when they did nothing, it grew limbs and tried to attack them, which made Seiichi use his aqua binding skill and shot it down. The chest disappeared and Seiichi leveled up again. Just then, an item box appeared in front of them, and inside they found the book on the treasure chest. From the book they learned that the invention of the item box had reduced the importance of the treasure chest. The desire to interact with humans again led the treasure chest to grow limbs and be able to speak and use magic. This only made the humans see it as a monster, and they chased it away. So hopeless and alone, the treasure chest could only roam about to places it had fond memories. They also found a rare item known as the Ring of Misfortune, and after appraising it, Seiichi learned that it multiplied a person's luck by -2. Saria then called his attention, but when he looked at her, she had her hand down her dress and was digging around her plots when she pulled out the Gid stone that was glowing red. Meanwhile, an exhausted Artoria used her axe as a walking stick as she unknowingly walked towards the room that held the dragon. She pushed the door open and walked in, and just as the door shut behind her, she called a presence before she saw a large dragon who asked her if she had come to be eaten. The dragon then curled into itself and used some kind of wind magic to push her back. Not one to back down in the face of danger, and when she could finally move again, she attacked the dragon. In the demon realm, Leia had just finished dishing out her punishment to her soldiers and told them to stop being whiny babies because she hadn't done anything serious to them. She claimed that the Black Dragon God was way worse, and he was known as the strongest one in the Demon Lord's army, and that running into him meant you had the worst luck. Seiichi and Saria watched the glowing stone, and Seiichi remembered Artoria's warning about the stone changing colors. They started freaking out because they knew Artoria was in danger, and the stone flew out of Saria's hand and hit the wall. Out of desperation, Seiichi punched the wall, and this time around he was able to break it, even if it hurt his hands. In the Black Dragon's room, Artoria was having her ass handed to her, but she wasn't ready to give up, because she wanted to make sure that Seiichi and Saria made it out safely. She decided to use her full strength, and so she charged a Super Saiyan attack and released her Calamity Berserker. The Black Dragon didn't even seem fazed at her little show of power, and when she attacked, he simply used his claw to swipe at her like a pesky fly. Although he hit her, she came back again with full force, but before she could get close to him, he fired spikes from his tail which pinned her to the wall while telling her to know her place. Artoria, who was completely consumed by her calamity, didn't stay down and tried to attack him again. This time around he impaled her with the spikes on his tail and admitted she had surprised him. He threw her to the floor, and as she lay there she muttered an apology to Seiichi and Saria because she believed she'd failed them by not defeating the dragon. She accepted her fate and closed her eyes, and just as the dragon was about to finish her off she heard her neighing. As she opened them, she saw Seiichi using his robe as a shield against the dragon's fire while holding a smiling Saria, who said they had come to rescue her. Artoria asked Seiichi and Saria how they had found her, and Saria explained that when the Gidstone started glowing red, they knew she was in danger, and Seiichi, who believed he was Superman, managed to break down the walls in their path, clearing the way for them to get to her easily. She then asked about the dragon, and Seiichi pointed at its slumped figure, saying they had accidentally hit him on their way in. The Black Dragon woke up more pissed than he was earlier because he was being bothered by filthy humans. He told them they would die by his hands, but Seiichi said he had no plans on losing to an ugly giant lizard. He attacked Seiichi with his fire breath, but he easily dodged it using instant movement. Annoyed that he was being outsmarted by livestock, the Black Dragon used conquering claws to throw a fireball at Seiichi, which he managed to block using his swords but was pushed back. Seiichi used advanced appraisal and discovered that the dragon was by far stronger than him since he was at level 5000. He managed to avoid getting hit by its tail using instant movement, but the dragon held him in place with a spell and used its tail to slap Seiichi into a wall. Seiichi wondered why his absorb and bind resistance skills weren't working when the Black Dragon unleashed his ultimate skill called Hell Inferno. Seiichi was sure they'd be burnt to a crisp this time around until Saria called out to him and told him to use the skill he used when he fought her. With renewed hope, he used his Water Spirit's dagger to activate the Fall Disaster, completely drenching both he and the dragon in water. At this point, the dragon was completely pissed and said he wasn't going to lose to another worthless human, so he shot a fireball at Seiichi, who dodged again, but he was once again held in place by a spell. As the dragon prepared to deliver his final blow, Seiichi willed his body to move and acquired an intimidation resistance skill. He then moved to attack the dragon, who was surprised that he had been able to release himself, but before he could react, Seiichi sliced him up nicely. He couldn't believe he had lost to another human, and lamented about his failed dream before disappearing, leaving behind an item box. As Seiichi wondered why the Black Dragon had hated humans so much, he leveled up, and an excited Saria tackled him to the ground. He asked her how Artoria was doing, and she said that the recovery potions put her to sleep, and she would be fine by the time she woke up. Relieved that she was fine, Seiichi wanted to go home, but Saria asked if he knew the way out of the dungeon, and he said they could check the items box for something that would help them. He acquired more skills as he touched the items and realized that if he ate the Black Dragon God's gem that he picked up, it would increase his stats and magic potency. In the items box, he also found a Black Conqueror's long coat that was better than his former robe that got burnt by the Black Dragon. The last item in the box was the Black Dragon's biography. From it, they learned that he was once a guardian deity for humans, but the humans got greedy and wanted to make powerful weapons from the Black Dragon's materials, and so they made plans to take him down. The one who had saved him was the Demon Lord, but he was defeated by the heroes the humans summoned. So with the Demon Lord dead, they sealed the Black Dragon in his dungeon, and he promised to get revenge on mankind. After reading his story, Seiichi cried. Saria later pointed out that Mr. Sheep hadn't come even though he had cleared the dungeon. Just as Seiichi was going to respond, a smoke bomb exploded in his face, leaving him with an afro. A letter fell to the ground and Saria picked it up, saying it was from Sheep. In the letter, he congratulated Seiichi on clearing the dungeon, while slowly becoming a heartless monster. He also explained that even though he cleared the dungeon, he had failed to keep the Black Dragon alive, so he could live peacefully with the Demon Lord. Finally, he told him to keep up the good work and clear more dungeons, but also said he was going on vacation, so Seiichi should actually refrain from doing that, which made him scream in frustration. They went back to the field with the still unconscious Artoria in Seiichi's arms, and as they walked towards the town's gate, she woke up and demanded he put her down. As she struggled to get out of his arms, Saria told her to be careful, because even though her wounds had healed, she was still weak. Artoria then apologized for getting them caught up in her misfortune. So she showed them her status and they saw that her luck was negative 2 million. She explained that she'd been known as the bearer of calamity since she was born, and that she brought misfortune to everyone around her. Seiichi asked if there was a way to break the curse, and said there wasn't. When they eventually got to the guild, Artoria asked Eris what was going on, and she said they were gathering information to find their missing friends, and she got all teary-eyed because Eris had referred to her as a friend. Seiichi then gave a very emotional speech on how she was important to them, and they didn't care about her auto-connect proximity bad luck curse. The entire thing became too much for her to handle, and she ran off. But Saria told Seiichi to go after her and make sure she was okay. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, Leah informed her squad that the Black Dragon God had been defeated. They were shocked because he was the strongest one in the Demon Lord's army, and they wondered who was powerful enough to have defeated him. Seiichi was trying to find Artoria using the good stone when he ran into Adriana, the owner of the wolf he had walked before. He asked if she had seen Artoria, and she said no, but then asked if he knew about Artoria's predisposition, and he said he did, so she asked him to get closer to Artoria. He'd assured her that Artoria was important to him, so he would not abandon her. He eventually found Artoria at the place they had their first quest, and he asked what she was doing there. But instead of answering him, she asked if she was really important to them, and he said yes. He then hugged her and said he would always be around if she needed him. But Artoria was too stunned to say anything, so she just let him hold her. Seiichi soon began thinking with his little head, and while smiling like a creep, he told himself that she smelled good. Artoria had called his name, and he jumped like he'd been caught stealing. She said she felt embarrassed by everything, but thanked him. Thinking of how he could help, he remembered the ring he had found in the dungeon, and figured it would have an opposite effect on Artoria, since her luck was already in the negative. He slipped the ring on her finger, and when she asked what it was, he told her that it would increase her luck. Artoria suddenly pushed him and ran away, leaving Seiichi confused by her behavior, which made him wonder what he had done wrong. He soon realized that he had sounded like he was proposing to her when he gave her the ring, and went after her to clear up the confusion, but soon stopped when he realized she was fine. Seiichi looked depressed while having breakfast with Saria, and when she asked what was wrong, he revealed that Artoria was avoiding him. Saria told him not to worry since she was sure Artoria did not hate him. When he asked what she wanted to spend the day doing, she said she wanted to help out at the orphanage. So Seiichi explained he'll go around town and gather information. After parting ways with Saria, Seiichi went to the guild to ask Dussel and Eris if they had information on any major events that had happened recently in hopes that he would find clues that would lead to Kanazuki and the others. Dussel told him that he'd heard that a neighboring country had done a hero summoning and brought heroes from another world to fight the resurrected demon lord. Unfortunately, they didn't know more and told him to check out the royal library for more information. Dussel pulled out a map from his speedos and handed it over to Seiichi, who looked like he would die from the smell. In the Kaiser Empire, the king and his crooked nose, word-faced advisors spoke about the heroes they had summoned. The king complained that Zakia had not allowed them to engage in real-life battles, so Wordface suggested that they enrolled the heroes in the Barbator Magic Academy. He said that they would easily dominate the school and top the classes, which will allow them to show other nations their power. The king was worried that the plan would fail, but the advisor said since the heroes were still children, they could easily manipulate. The king asked how they planned to achieve it, and he explained they would make them wear enslavement bracelets, which would ensure they didn't disobey them. Meanwhile, Seiichi couldn't get useful information at the royal library, so he left and went to explore the town. He came across a young girl with dog ears selling paintings, and when he asked how much they cost, she was surprised because no one had offered to buy any from her before. With his purchase in hand, he realized he was hungry and followed the smell of food to a hidden cafe in the alley. Before going in, he prayed the place wasn't filled with perverted weirdos like the guild. Inside, he met only two people, a blonde-haired man and the bartender who welcomed him. Seiichi devoured the food that was set before him like a starving man, and the blonde-haired man laughed at his behavior, after which he introduced himself as Rands. Seiichi introduced himself in Rands, said his name sounded Eastern, and not wanting to give away the fact that he was from another world, he played along. Rands then introduced the bartender as Node, the cafe's owner. Artoria was seated with Adriana in her garden, and as they talked, Adriana told her to admit that she was in love with Seiichi, and an emotional, teary-eyed Artoria said she wanted to let Seiichi know how she felt about him. Back at the cafe, Node told Seiichi that if a man placed a ring on a woman's left ring finger, he was promising his eternal love for her, and said that if he tried to take it back or even tried to say it was a mistake, he'd be castrated. A shocked Saidichi imagined his sausage being cut in two and knew he didn't want that. Rand suggested that he marry Artoria instead. When he hesitated, Node figured he already had someone else in mind, and Rand's outright told him to be open-minded and start his own harem. Before he left, Node told him to make his intentions clear and apologize if he had to. After he left, Node told Rand to be careful not to expose himself. Seiichi went to the orphanage to pick Saria up and ran into Artoria, who came to look for him. He wanted to explain his intention for giving her the ring and apologize to her, but he was too much of a coward to open his mouth. When he finally grew some balls and tried to speak, she stopped him with a kiss. She said she knew he hadn't given her the ring because he had feelings for her, but she didn't care because she was in love with him. Seiichi was torn between staying loyal to his gorilla wife and giving in to his feelings for the awkward Artoria. And before he could respond, Saria came out and told him that she didn't mind sharing him because it was normal for females to flock to strong males. She told Seiichi to accept Artoria, and he wasted no time in proclaiming his love for her. They shared a kiss and Saria hugged them and proclaimed the birth of their hybrid harem. Duskwell thrust his hips in Seiichi's face as he ate, and Seiichi told him that he could speak without putting his junk in his face. He advised Seiichi to get a horse since every high-ranking adventurer had to have one, and pulled out a map from his speedos again. Seiichi ended up going to buy a horse alone since Saria and Artoria had other things to attend to. When he got to the place, the old geezer who owned the place asked if he wanted a horse for the Royal Cup. He'd explained that it was a race around the city walls, and because of the nature of the race, the winners got expensive rewards. As he showed Seiichi the collection of horses he had for racing, Seiichi wondered why the crazy man was showing him racehorses when he had no intention of joining the Royal Cup. The next was a dumb-looking knockoff of Santa's reindeers which died easily because they forgot to breathe. And the last one was a violent donkey that hated everyone. As Seiichi watched her beat up the owner, he wondered what she was saying and immediately acquired a skill to understand all languages. Seiichi called her a loud mouth when he finally understood what she was saying, and she noticed he could understand her, so she told him to come into her pen. As soon as he stepped in, she tried to kick him, but he dodged it easily. She tried again, and he held up her hind legs. She eventually gave up and apologized to him, but she then told him that he was the one she had been waiting to serve all her life. She introduced herself as Lulun, and Seiichi told the owner he would buy her. But before they left, she kicked the man in the face one more time. Lulun was so excited to be out of the stables for the first time in her life and found everything she saw fascinating. Seiichi bought her food and she asked if she could get more after she was done. As they walked around the market, Seiichi saw someone speaking with the dog-eared girl he'd bought a painting from and went over to see what was happening. The girl recognized him immediately and thanked him again for buying a painting. The man who had been speaking to her barely acknowledged Seiichi and told her to join the charity painting competition that was held a month after the Royal Cup race. Mei said she wasn't talented enough to join such a competition, but the young man said that since Seiichi had already bought her painting, it meant that he had recognized her talent. He then asked Seiichi if he had bought any of his own paintings, and he said no, which left him shocked that Seiichi had never seen his paintings before, so he showed one to him. Lulun and Seiichi took one look at the terrible painting and said it looked like a triangle, and while he was wallowing in shame, Seiichi asked Mei who he was. The young man introduced himself as Clayburger, the eldest son of Duke Burger, then went back to begging Mei to join the competition. Before she could respond, Seiichi told her that he was joining the Royal Cup and said that if he finished at the top, she too should try and enter the painting competition. She revealed that the Royal Cup was dangerous and asked if he wasn't scared. So he admitted that he was, but said if he didn't try, he would never overcome his fear. Clay mentioned that the prize for the 5th place in the race was a gigantic fish, and as soon as the gluttonous Lulun heard this, she became very excited. On the day of the Royal Cup, before the race began, the announcer introduced the prizes that were to be won. The 2nd place prize was pictures of the Valkyrie captain, which had the crowd screaming with excitement, and the grand prize was a ticket to spend the entire day with the Valkyries. All of which Lulun had no interest with, since all she wanted was the 5th place prize that was the gigantic fish. Mei came to see Seiichi and asked him to withdraw because the race was dangerous, but like some wise sage, he gave her a whole speech of how everyone was scared of the first step and needed someone to push them. He then told her he was going to be the one to help her with her first step. The rules were explained and the race began. Everyone took off on their horses, except for those who had deer horses that died because they were startled by the sound of the starting gun. Lulun and Seiichi were falling behind because Lulun was hungry and had no energy to run. Seiichi checked his pocket dimension and found the fruit of evolution cultivation set that Mr. Sheep had given to him and gave it to her to eat. As the race progressed, the contestants used whatever trick they could think of to make sure they were in the lead. One contestant blew on a horn which summoned a pack of grand wolves and a large hell wolf that blocked the path of the other contestants. Just as the announcer was about to call off the race, Lulun came barreling down the road at full speed. Seiichi told her to slow down, but she said she couldn't control her speed. She jumped over the other contestants and landed in the midst of the grand wolves with so much force that her landing sent them flying in different directions. The hell wolf tried to attack her, but it seemed that the fruit had doubled her strength and with one kick, she knocked it out. The other contestants were scared of going against them and forfeited the race, but Lulun ran to the finish line and they were declared the winners. Artoria and Syria stood among the crowd, beaming with pride at their man. The only person who wasn't happy about their win was Lulun because she had wanted the fish and Seiichi tried to comfort her. She was hugging him when she started glowing, and that was the moment Syria and Artoria came inside. They stood with their mouths open as they looked at Lulun, who had transformed into a human. Seiichi got a little bit excited at the sight and had a nosebleed as soon as she hugged him. Confused Lulun asked her master what was going on, and as Seiichi tried to explain to her, Artoria also came up to him and asked what he was doing. But before he could explain the misunderstanding, she punched him in the face. When Seiichi told her that the naked woman was actually Lulun who had changed because he fed her the fruit of evolution, she didn't believe him and told him to come up with a better lie. Syria told her it was the truth, but Artoria told her to stop defending the lying, cheating bastard, so Syria had no choice but to turn into her gorilla form right in front of her. She couldn't believe her eyes and looked like she was going to pass out, but instead she told Lulun to follow her. In town, she found a clothing store, and they bought clothes for her. As they stood in the store talking, two Valkyries came to take Seiichi away. They bound his hands with a spell and asked him to follow them. In the demon realm, all the captains of the different divisions of the demon lord's army were gathered in a conference room. As they spoke amongst themselves, Luchabut, the demon lord's daughter, walked in. After she thanked them for answering her summons, she explained that she had summoned them because she wished to discuss a possible alliance with the Windberg Kingdom. The captains were all shocked in cries. The demon lord's aide asked why she would want to make peace with the filthy humans who had been persecuting demons for years. He reminded her that it was the humans that had sealed her father away, but Lydia said that it was all the more reason for them to draw their people together. She said that the king of the Windberg Kingdom was already trying to make friends with demons. Leia then told them that she had gotten information that the human who had defeated the Black Dragon God was from the Windberg Kingdom. She said the Black Dragon God had told her that he had been defeated by a human named Seiichi. He also told her that they had fought fair and square and he had lost to Seiichi. Kryze told Lutia to remember the prophecy that said joining forces with the humans would bring great calamity on them, and she said if that happened, she would give up her head. He kept pushing the issue, and one of the captains told him to shut his mouth and follow his master's orders like the dog he was, or he'd deal with him. Some of the other captains agreed and threatened him too, and like a coward. He ran away, but not before he told them they would regret joining hands with the human. The captains swore to support Ludia with her plans, and she thanked them. Alone in the throne room, Kryze was worried that his plans would be ruined, but said no one would be able to stop him either way and laughed like a maniacal madman. The Valkyries took Seiichi to the Archshell Castle, and when he asked why they had brought him there, they told him that, as the winner of the Royal Cup, he had earned the right to spend the day with them. They took him to the training ground where their captain Luis and other Valkyries were training. Seiichi watched them and was impressed by her skill, but was also surprised that even with his sixth sense, he couldn't follow her movements. Louise walked up to them and introduced herself to Seiichi before she placed a sword in his hand and asked him to have a mock battle with her. Meanwhile, Seiichi's schoolmates were teleported to the Barbados Magic Academy, and Kanazuki got into a confrontation who challenged her and her friends to a mock battle. When she refused, they tried to intimidate her, but she slapped one of them, causing them to back off while advising her to watch her back. Back at the training ground, Louise attacked Seiichi, but he easily dodged, and she was surprised he was able to dodge the attack. But Seiichi assured her that it hasn't been easy like she thought. She told him she would use her full strength with her next attack and unleashed a series of attacks on him, but he was able to dodge them all. As she was about to land her final attack, Seiichi acquired additional skills. He easily dodged the attack and kicked her sword out of her hands, making the Valkyries present shocked as they couldn't believe he had gone toe-to-toe with their captain and won. Seiji himself couldn't believe what happened because his body had moved on its own. Louise asked if she could call him master and asked him to take care of her. Another Valkyrie asked Seiichi to come with her because she had something to tell him. In some other part of the castle, the king was getting ready for a bath but was unaware of the assassin that watched him through a hole in the ceiling. The Valkyrie that Seiichi had followed out of the training room told him that Louise was born without any magic or skills, but Seiichi thought she was just straight up lying because he just fought her. She said Louise was able to recreate any swordsmanship she saw, and Seiichi thought it was an impressive talent. She said the only person that could match her was the Black Paladin, and before she could say more, Louise walked in and apologized to Seiichi for calling him master without his permission, and thanked him for saving her. Seeing that she was confused, she explained that because of her talent, people were scared to be friends with her, and so she was all alone and had no one to call friends. Seiichi could relate with her because he too had once led a sad, miserable, and lonely life, so he agreed to become her master. She thanked him, and he said he wasn't sure he could teach her well, but she told him not to worry as she would just copy whatever he did. Just as Louise said they should go train, they heard a piercing scream and ran to investigate. They saw a maid who told them that someone had attacked the king, and Louise asked Seiichi to go home, but he said he wanted to help, but they refused. Instead of doing what he was told, the stubborn ass used the skill World Vision to locate the culprit and discovered that the assassin was just a child. Still tracking the assassin's movements, he checked her stats and learned her name was Olga Kalmaria, and she was only 8 years old. He also learned that she was enslaved. The assassin jumped down from the roof and Seiichi confronted her. She tried to kill him, but he easily caught the knives she threw and gained a reflex defense skill, which made his body react immediately. Before he could react, the reflexes kicked in, and he threw the knives at her, but she couldn't dodge them, and they pinned her to the wall with her robe. She got free and tried to attack him again, but he easily dodged. Seiichi wondered why such a small child would be an assassin and tried to question her, but she did not give him the chance to. He eventually knocked her out, only for Louise and the Valkyries came in, and when they saw the child, they asked Seiichi who she was. So he told them she was the one who attacked the king, which was shocking. Louise told him to hand the girl over to Lorna and asked her to interrogate her. Seiichi didn't look convinced that Lorna could actually do the job because of how unserious she looked, but Louise assured him that she was the best, saying that she had learned all her interrogation skills from Eris. Upon hearing this, Seiichi was sure she'd learned everything, but how to actually interrogate a prisoner from Eris. Seiichi asked how the king was doing, and Louise told him that he would not wake up as the knife Olga had used was a cursed one, and the curse embedded in it was eternal slumber. She said that whoever was cursed with eternal slumber would never wake up, and Seiichi wondered if he could do anything to help. He then asked them to take him to the king. In the king's room, Seiichi was surprised to see that the king was Rans, the man he had met at the cafe. Louise introduced Seiichi to the head of the kingdom's magic division, who happened to be her brother Florio. He told them that he had used healing magic on the wound, but was unable to remove the curse, and the Valkyries became worried because they thought they would not be able to save the king. They pleaded with Seiichi to help them save the king, and since he had a magic creation skill, he tried to create a spell that would heal the king. While trying to visualize what he wanted in the spell, Seiichi's mind kept imaging the stupidest things, and when the dumb idiot tried again, all he could do was say "get better." He kept repeating the words and accidentally said it out loud, and it was at that moment that everyone realized they had put the king's life in the hands of the biggest fool they had ever seen. Luckily for him, his skill kicked him and created an invert magic called "get better." The dullard didn't even know what it meant and was surprised it actually worked. The king woke up and was surprised to see Seiichi there, but Florio told him that Seiichi had saved him by undoing the curse that had been placed on him. The king thanked him and promised to give him a reward, but he refused, which made Louise ask him to drop the good boy act and stop pretending to be modest and ask for something he wanted. In the Kaiser Empire, Zekia went to see the king and asked where the heroes were. The king said he had sent his new slaves to Barbator Magic Academy so he could intimidate the other nations. At the academy, Kanazaki and her friends were discussing how the heroes were the most hated people in the academy, when the three scumbags who had challenged them before interrupted them. She told them to leave, but they refused and threatened to cause a scene. She didn't tell them what they had been talking about. After she told them, they laughed and reminded her that Helio, the old geezer with the warts, had told them to show their power as heroes, and since they had been able to master magic easily, They had simply exercised their rights as the best by putting the others in their place. However, Kanazaki claimed that they had gone too far, but they told her to get off her high horse and stop acting righteous, and not wanting to cause more problems, she and her friends walked away. Louise asked Lorna how the interrogation was coming along while they took a bath, but Lorna admitted that she had not been able to get anything out of Olga, since she was being tight-lipped. They then talked about how cool and manly Sadichi had been when he told the king to allow him learn magic and swordsmanship with the Valkyries as his reward. Meanwhile, outside the castle in a bathhouse where Saria, Artoria, and Lulun were taking a bath. Artoria asked if they were not worried about Seiichi, who was yet to return, and said that there was a possibility the womanizing piece of shit would come back with another woman on his arm. Saria said she wasn't worried because he could overcome anything, while Artoria admitted she was jealous and even imagined Seiichi making out with the Valkyries before Guskel somehow made his way there and took Seiichi in his arms. Meanwhile, in the castle bathroom, King Rans told Seiichi that his dream was to build public bathhouses throughout the world, because apparently everyone was equal when they were naked and in a bath. In the Kaiser Empire, Zekia asked the king why he had sent the heroes to the academy, saying that something bad could happen to them, but the king said he didn't care if anything happened to sacrificial lambs who were meant to serve him. Zekia could not believe that he would be so cruel and asked what he would do if the heroes became too powerful and turned against them. The king's advisor said that it would never happen because he had personally placed enslavement bracelets on them, and if they tried to take them off, they would die. Before Zekia could say more, an arrow flew in through a window, and he quickly stopped it before it could reach the king. He told the advisor to look after the king while he went after the assailant. Using the opportunity that they were alone, Helio, the king's advisor, told him that he had heard that the demons and the king of the Windberg were forming an alliance. He told the king that it was an insult to him since he was preparing to go to war with the demons. The king just laughed and told him that he had already sent the Twilight Assassin to take care of the Windberg king. Florio woke Seiichi up, and when he saw Saria, Artoria, and Lulum, he asked what they were doing there, so Florio told him that they had asked to see him. Artoria then told him that Saria was very worried about him, and that she was jealous because she thought he might be developing plot with the Valkyries, but Saria called her out on her bullshit. Just then, Luis came in and referred to Sadichi as master. While Saria and Lulun complimented her, jealous Artoria was ready to beat him to a pulp. Fearing for his safety, he immediately explained that she was the captain of the Valkyries. Saria then introduced herself as Seiichi's wife, and Florio congratulated him for landing such a babe, but before Sadichi could respond, Artoria introduced herself as his girlfriend, and Lulun introduced herself as his loyal servant. A surprised Florio called him a wild man, while Louise claimed she was proud to have him as her master. Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, Lorna had tied Olga up and was preparing to begin her interrogation. Lorna began her interrogation, and as Seiichi watched from another room, he wondered if she thought she was in a cop drama. Lorna tried to get Olga to talk by teasing her with the smell of food while she ate, and because Seiichi couldn't bear to watch this poor excuse of a bad cop movie, he barged into the room. Louise followed suit and untied Olga. Seiichi then told her to eat as much as she wanted. When she finished the meal, Louise told Seiichi that the collar she had on was an enslavement collar that forced the wearer to obey the orders of the person who placed it in them. Seiichi realized the collar was the reason Olga had attacked the king and Lorna. Seiichi then asked why they couldn't just take the collar off, but Olga said it wasn't possible, and to prove her point, she pulled on it and was immediately electrocuted. Seiichi was enraged and wondered who would do such a cruel thing. The king of the Kaiser Empire had just gotten the news that Olga had failed and was enraged, but Helio told him not to worry because she still had her collar on. The king asked if he was going to make her kill herself, and he said yes, prompting the king to approve immediately. Meanwhile, somewhere in the forest, Zekia was training and wondered if he was doing the right thing by wielding his sword for the Empire. He remembered his encounter with the assailant who had tried to kill the king. The man had said he did it to take revenge for the demon girl that had been killed because the king had given the order. Zekia had told him that it wasn't enough for him to threaten the Empire by attacking the king, but the man told him that he was nothing but a mindless puppet that always did what he'd been told. They got into a fight, and the man used his skill to make arrows rain on Zekia, but he managed to deflect them all. The man said he had expected nothing more from the blade of the king and told him that he would meet him again when he was no longer a puppet. Back in the Windbird Kingdom, Seiichi had been told that no one but the person who had placed the collar on Oliga could take it off, and there was no magic spell that could handle the situation. He then decided to create a spell that would allow him to remove it, but he couldn't visualize it properly. Looking at her pained expression, he promised to free her, and that was when he got an image of freedom in his mind, and his version of freedom turned out to be Abraham Lincoln.
There! That should be the perfect visual!
He unintentionally projected him, and he appeared in the room chanting the word free. That was how the new liberation spell called President Link was created, and the collar on Olga broke. When Seiichi told her she was now free, she burst into tears, and the clueless Seiichi had no idea what went wrong, but Serio went to her and hugged her while Artoria couldn't believe that someone had done something so cruel to a little girl. Despite what was happening, Lulun was busy eating the leftovers and disturbing the very emotional moment, because the only thing that mattered was food. Oliga told them that in the Kaiser Empire the beast folk were being persecuted. She explained that they took all the adults to a concentration camp and trained the children to become assassins. She had lived her life serving as a killer for the Kaiser Empire, and admitted she had killed a lot of people since the collar was placed on her. She claimed that she was only valuable as a killer and nothing more, but Seiichi took her hand and told her she could start over again. He told her that the Kaiser Empire was the evil one for treating the beast folk differently. He asked her to see him as an elder brother, and Seria asked if Oliga could stay with them. But Oliga said she couldn't because the Kaiser Empire would come after them since she was now a traitor. He promised to protect her, saying that even though he looked like a weakling, he was actually strong. He asked Luis if it was okay to take Oliga, and she said she had already planned on asking him to take care of her. Helios spoke to Kryze through an orb and asked him what the Demon Lord's army was doing. Kryze told him that although they had to make changes in their plans because of Lucia's wish to join hands with the Windbird Kingdom, the plan was coming along well. On hearing this, he was glad their plans were working and promised to do his part as well. Seiichi was learning to control his water magic under Florio's guidance, and when he complained how stressful it was, Florio told him that he was doing well compared to the first time when he almost drowned them. While he watched Seria and Artoria do their own thing, Luis came to them. She asked him to protect the king while she was away, and when he asked where she was going to, she told him that they had received a report from the Black Paladin that monsters were becoming more active along the border. So she and the Valkyries were going to help him handle the situation. He agreed to her request, and she thanked him. When the Valkyries were ready to leave, Seiichi and the others came to see them off while promising to handle things while they were gone. In the castle, while Seiichi was lamenting how overpowered and monstrous he was becoming, he heard Gussel's voice. He also noticed Eris, and when Seiichi asked what they were doing there, he'd explained that they had escorted someone to see the king. As the poor Walmart budget Frodo walked up to them, Florio recognized him as the holy mage Barnabas, and when Seiichi asked who he was, Florio was appalled by his level of ignorance and said that he was the only mage to have mastered all kinds of magic. He then went ahead to geek out like a true otaku over his idol and lost his cool when Barnabas said he knew who he was. While they spoke, Seiichi wondered why such a great person had come to see the king. In the throne room, King Rans welcomed Gussel and Eris, who hadn't left their weird behaviors at the guild. When he saw Barnabas, he was surprised and asked why he hadn't informed him of his plan to visit. Seiichi asked what their relationship was, and Florio told him that Barnabas had been the king's teacher. Rans asked why Barnabas had come, so he revealed that it was because of the Magic Academy. He said that since the Isekai heroes joined the academy, they had brought nothing but trouble. Before Seiichi could confirm if they were his mates, a knight came to inform them that a horde of monsters had appeared in the forest and were invading the capital city. He reported that there were about 5,000 of them, all boss level. Rans was worried, and Barnabas said he had nothing to worry about since they had the mighty Valkyries, but Rans told him that they had gone to defend the border. At the border, Louise was surprised by the number of monsters gathered, and the Black Paladin told her that he had destroyed a large number of them before they came, but they were still coming. Louise suggested they used an all-out attack so they wouldn't be able to recover from it. She then led her Valkyries into battle. As the battle raged, she was informed that monsters had invaded the capital city. From the demon realm, the weirdo Helio giggled as he watched the chaos unfold in the human realm. As they watched the monsters approach, Artoria admitted that in all her years as an adventurer, she'd never seen that many monsters at the same time. However, Seria was excited for the opportunity to fight again, and Lulun said she was scared because if they could not defend the city, she wouldn't get to eat all the food she loved again. Seiichi couldn't believe the dumb donkey was thinking about food at such a critical time, but she laughed like a crazy person and said she'd fight for the sake of good food. Alika pulled on Seiichi's robe and offered to help them because she wanted to live happily with them in the city, but Seiichi asked her to make sure she didn't overexert herself, and she made him promise to pet her head if she did well. Aside from them, all the other weirdos from the guild were present, and they each reminded Seiichi why he had considered them crazy in the first place. With everyone pumped up, they charged at the monsters, and before Seiichi could join them, Barnabas told him to stay behind and watch. Gussel somehow used the power of his muscles to bring down the monsters, while Eris managed to tie some of them up and used her whip on them. The man-baby dropped milk bottles that exploded, and while the Flasher used the blinding power of his junk on the monsters, Claude was the only normal person amongst them. Even the Mohawks used some weird technique they claimed was passed down in their clan. At that point, Seiichi just had to agree that they looked cool. He watched on as the cafe owner easily defeated a King Beast and King Rands, revealed he didn't expect anything less from a former assassin. Saria was able to take down the monsters by using her gorilla arm, and Artoria used a freezing spell before killing her opponent. Lulun used her powerful kicks, which she named Lulunilian Shot, and little Oliga slashed through the monsters easily. Finally, Barnabas used a spell called Chaos Rain, which rained fire down on the monsters. Despite that, the monsters kept coming, so he used Chaos Tornado to sweep them away, but managed to keep it from touching his allies. Just as Seiichi was getting optimistic about the battle, another report came informing them of another horde of monsters, this time all big boss grade, which was way bigger than the last. As they watched the monsters approach, Barnabas claimed the horde was filled with S-rank monsters, and at that point, the guild members and the knights were struggling against them and were being pushed back. Seiichi wondered if he could create a wide Rongaze spell to defeat the monsters, but the problem was that it could also take out his friends and allies along with the monsters. After pondering the idea, he finally came to a conclusion and told Barnabas that he knew the ultimate spell to end everything. He envisioned a spell that attacked from above and acted like the judgment of God. In his mind, he saw Lady Justice and called the spell Judgment before he activated it, but when nothing happened, he fell to his knees in shame. Just then, Lady Justice lifted her sword and delivered her judgment, causing lightning to strike the monsters one by one, completely annihilating them. When the light struck Gussel and Eris, the weirdos embraced the pain, even asking for more. Seiichi checked the stats of the spell and discovered that it struck those it deemed harmful, and apparently those too were a plague to humanity. With the monsters wiped out, they celebrated their victory. Hilio, who had been watching everything from the demon realm, and as he was complaining, Lady Justice struck him too with judgment, leaving him looking like a rare cooked steak. Since Seiichi had defeated all the monsters, he received new skills and items from their remains, but complained because he didn't need more cheat skills. Rands and Barnabas praised him and asked him to keep using his powers to defend their kingdom before leaving to check on the damage that had been done. The girls came to meet him as soon as Rands left, and Artoria asked what magic he just used, saying his status was a lie, and that he'd been pretending to be weak all this time. Oliga called Seiichi's attention and reminded him of his promise to pet her head if she did well, and as he did that, so Barnabas tried to look cute and asked him to pet his head too. Disgusted, Seiichi immediately refused. Finally getting serious, Barnabas asked Seiichi if he would come to his academy and become a teacher. Seiichi asked why he wanted him, and he said that he was impressed by the spell he used to wipe out the monsters. He then said that he knew it was a spell of his own creation, and he wanted to learn from him. Even though Seiichi kept trying to refuse, the stubborn old man was determined and insisted that he come to the academy. Seiichi told him that he had promised Louise to protect the king and the kingdom while she was away, and that he also couldn't bear to be away from his women. Barnabas then explained Saria could enroll as a student, while Artoria could come as a teacher, and even Lulun could either become a student or a martial arts instructor. Still, Seiichi refused, but the girls claimed they had no problem with it as long as they were all together, so he agreed to go with Barnabas once Louise returned. Since they still had time before Louise returned, Seiichi decided to take each girl out on a date. The first was Lulun. Their date was at a restaurant, and the greedy donkey pigged out on all the food she could eat. He took Artoria out next, and then went shopping before heading to the theater. His last date was with Saria, but she asked if she could bring Oliga with them because she felt bad leaving her alone. The three of them went out, and while they watched Oliga play with other children. Seiichi thanked Syria for loving a good-for-nothing loser like him, and after professing his love to her, he tried to kiss her, but the children noticed Syria was crying and called Seiichi a bad man. He tried to explain himself, but they lost interest in what he was saying and asked him to play with them. As they played, they noticed something floating in the sky, and on it were different pictures, and one of them was May. At the town square, charity painting competition was being held. Seiichi and the girls went to watch with a lot of enthusiasm. The MCs soon introduced the contestants and their paintings, and the first was Clay, and when he unveiled his painting, the crowd wasn't impressed. Syria called it a pretty sun, and Lulun said it looked like an apple, while Seiichi wondered why she only thought of food. They were surprised when Clay said the painting was the flames of a matchstick. The final contestant was May, and she was very nervous when she unveiled her painting. Seiichi was shocked to see that she had painted him like a gallant knight sitting atop a horse, but in his case, it was a donkey. She explained that it was a painting of the man who gave her courage to enter the competition, while revealing the title of the painting was Hero, because he was indeed her hero. Seiichi congratulated May on winning the competition, and she told her that Clay's grandfather had offered her the opportunity to go study in Amiria, the city of art. She asked if he would allow her to paint him as her first painting after graduating from the art school, and he said yes. She then bid him farewell and left with Clay. Meanwhile, the Valkyries finally returned to the city, and Seiichi met them at the gate, where he welcomed them. Louise told him that she heard he would be leaving with Barnabas and wanted to go with him, but he told her that he understood she needed to protect her kingdom and asked her to visit them sometimes. Back in the demon realm, Kryze lay on the floor looking depressed when he got a call from the demon lord's apostles, and as they spoke, the demon lord demanded to know why they were delaying in bringing him back. Cowering like the coward he was, Kryze informed him that the apostles were scattered across the world trying to gather the despair needed to sustain him. The demon lord claimed that it wasn't enough and demanded they offer him more despair, death, and misfortune, so that they could bring about his return. A female apostle suggested they target the Bullied Magic Academy, since it was filled with children of royalty and ability from around the world. She said that taking the lives of the children was sure to bring great despair and chaos, and Hilio agreed to it. At the academy, Kanazuki remembered her conversation with another female student who had asked about Seiichi. She said he had once saved her, and she wanted to repay him. On the day Seiichi and the girls left the city for the academy, their friends from the guild, along with King Rans and the Valkyrie, all came to bid them farewell. They thanked him for all he's done for them and told him they would be waiting for his return. On their way to the academy, Barnabas asked Seiichi if he missed the city, and he said he loved the place and its people and would surely return someday. Barnabas told him they were almost at the academy and that he was counting on Seiichi, and before he could respond, something dropped on the roof of the carriage. Seiichi looked out and saw a guy dressed like a superhero. When he asked who he was, he introduced himself as the hero of justice, gargant of certain victories, and asked him to remember it. However, Seiichi simply branded him as yet another weirdo. Finally, Seiichi and the girls made it to Bullied Magic Academy, and Barnabas offered to show them around. He took them through the academy's city, and while the others were taking in the sights, the gluttonous donkey Lulun was busy stuffing her face with food. Meanwhile, inside the academy, Kanazuki and her friends were discussing their outcast status when she suddenly jumped up, causing her friends to ask what was wrong. She said she could smell something familiar, and one of the boys asked if the smell was Seiichi. Kanazuki confirmed it, saying he was the only one who could pull off the garbage-smelling cologne. Later on, Seiichi and the girls gathered in Barnabas's office, and he explained that the isekai heroes from the Kaiser Empire were being treated as outcasts because their abilities surpassed most of the students there. He then turned around and ordered Seiichi to become the savior of the academy and maintain order in the school. Seiichi was shocked because the crazy old man never informed him that becoming Superman was part of the job description. Barnabas explained that he wanted him to train some students to become as overpowered as he was, even if they had no plot armor, so that they could match the heroes. Artoria then asked what role each of them would have to take on to blend in at the academy, and Barnabas was more than happy to give them the roles, so he said Syria and Lulun would be students. While Lulun asked what Seiichi thought about their outfit, Barnabas and Seiichi told them they looked good. This made Syria so happy she immediately went gorilla and shredded her uniform. Next, the perverted old geezer said Artoria would be an adventurer teacher, but his imagination of her had the old man bleeding gallons from his nose, which caused Artoria to punch some sense into him. Moving on, he said Oliga would be Seiichi's assistant, and as she did a cute pose for them, the disgusting pedos
FBI, open up!
started praising her with excited looks on their faces. So once again, Artoria delivered punishment on Barnabas. While Barnabas urged the girls to do their best, Seiichi watched them and recalled how he'd gone from a pathetic loser to an overpowered Rizzler, all because he'd eaten the fruit of evolution. However, his sappy monologue was cut short by Barnabas, who told him to accompany him so he could introduce him to his class. He told Seiichi he'd be in charge of Class F, but warned him that the students were problem students. When he tried to explain further, the door suddenly opened and slammed him into the wall, shocking Seiichi and the others. The teacher who was responsible for kicking the door open walked into the room and went to speak to Barnabas, who had been compressed into paper. After gaining his body back, Barnabas grovelled by the teacher's feet, while Artoria demanded to know who she was. She didn't get to answer because Barnabas got up still trembling and tried to speak to the teacher, who scolded him for playing hooky and leaving all his work for the staff to handle. She dropped the mountain of backed-up paperwork he had to sign on his table and almost scared the old man into the afterlife when she got up in his face and demanded to know what his excuse was. Barnabas explained that he was working for the good of the academy, but she told him that if he cared about the academy, he'd start by finishing the paperwork. The old sleazeball seemed to have a death wish because he asked if he could bounce her melons, which made her so mad she threw all the paperwork on him. She then instructed a scared-looking Seiichi and the girls to follow her, leaving lecher Barnabas and his fried brain buried neck-deep in a mountain of paperwork. Seiichi tried to talk as they walked through the hallway, but got scared when she suddenly stopped and turned around. She then apologized for what had gone down in the principal's office and introduced herself as Beatrice Rodner, the former class teacher of Class F. This surprised Seiichi, so she explained that the principal had instructed her to support him as the class's assistant teacher. She then pointed towards Class A and told Artoria and Lulun to head in that direction as they were supposed to be in that class. Lulun complained because she didn't want to be separated from her beloved master, but she ran off excitedly when Beatrice mentioned that the cafeteria was close to her classroom, causing Seiichi to wear a look of unbelief, as he couldn't believe how quickly the greedy donkey switched sides at the mention of the cafeteria. Artoria then bid them farewell, while Beatrice asked the rest to come with her. But Seiichi asked if she was going to about him taking her job away from her. Beatrice didn't answer immediately and gripped the file in her hand tight, which scared Seiichi as he wondered if he'd meet the same fate as Barnabas. However, she didn't pop off on him as he expected and admitted that she had been unable to bring out their true potential. Beatrice told Seiichi that even though everyone at the academy saw them as problem children and a complete waste of resources, she believed in them. She added that since the principal had acknowledged him, she would place her trust in him with the hopes that he'd help the students excel. Seiichi promised to do his best, and Saria and Oliga assured her that with Seiichi around, everything would be fine. They soon arrived at the door of Class F, and Seiichi wondered if he'd be able to handle the job. But Saria gave him some words of encouragement which boosted his confidence. However, when he opened the door, he got hit on the head by a wash basin that had been set up by the students, but he soldiered on and walked into the classroom. When he got to the front of the class, he raised his head to address the class, but was surprised when he saw there were only 4 students. One was a delinquent with a nail bat, one was a guy with a bare head, one a prince, and the last a sundered girl. The worst part was they all screamed trouble as he looked at them, and Seiichi started wondering if Beatrice had been bullshitting him when she called them good students. The clash-looking delinquent with a pompadour slammed his bat on the floor, scaring Seiichi, whose pathetic scream drew the attention of the remaining students to him. He stood waiting to see what would happen, and they got all up in his face, trying to intimidate him as they moved around like bubblehead dolls. Meanwhile, inside a cave in the demon realm, the pig Cries was speaking to the wart-nosed Hilio through an orb as they discussed their plans to resurrect the demon lord. Hilio said they needed the negative emotions of mankind's despair and asked Cries what plans he'd put in place to achieve that. Cries laughed like a maniac and informed him that the Great Devil Order had devised a plan to attack Arbiter Magic Academy, after which they would channel the despair of the parents who had lost their children into resurrecting the demon lord. Hilio praised him for his deliciously cooked plan, and as they laughed like maniacs, Cries was suddenly bound by 3 golden rings. While he struggled to get free, he demanded to know who had dared to attack him, and that's when Demiurgos and Angrave stepped out of the shadows. Cries asked what they were doing there, so Demiurgos revealed that they planned to head to Arbiter themselves, which surprised him. Angria added that they couldn't entrust such an important task to an incompetent, constipated loser.
I agree.
But Kreese argued that he was still in the process of planning the attack. Demiros then told him there was no need for preparation because they would handle everything easily. The two then walked away, leaving Kreese bound as he begged them to set him free. But they ignored his cries, and as they walked away, Angria announced that she couldn't wait to feast on the screams of the children. Back in Class F, Seiichi's torment continued as he fearfully tried to introduce himself to the delinquent, who took pleasure in the fear he was instilling in poor Seiichi until Beatrice called him. He looked like he'd shit his pants as he turned to look at her, but immediately went up to her and tried to butter her up as he referred to her as Boss Beatrice. Beatrice didn't bat an eye as she hit him on the head with her notebook, which caused him to scream in pain and fall over. Saria and Oliga, who had been watching silently, held their heads, and Saria commented on how much that would have hurt his brain, assuming he had any in the first place. The boy got back up and complained that Beatrice had used the corner of the book to hit him, but she told him to shut his pie hole and said he'd been the one looking for trouble. When she revealed that Seiichi was their new teacher, the boy turned on him and asked why an underdeveloped man-child would be their teacher, but Beatrice's response was a slap across his face with her book, which sent him flying into his chair. With everyone settled in their chairs and the delinquent, Beatrice introduced Seiichi as their new teacher and Oliga as his assistant. After Seiichi and Oliga's introductions, she introduced Saria as their new classmate, which made the delinquent's eyes pop out hearts as soon as he saw her. He then leaped from his desk and tried to pull a bad boy riz on her, asking her out on a date. But Beatrice noticed that the only thing bad was his putrid breath that smells like poison gas. She then asked them to introduce themselves, and the delinquent introduced himself as Agnos Passion, the terrifying pompadour of hell who had won 999 fights. Saria was so impressed with his introduction that she decided to introduce herself and transformed into her gorilla form, shocking the class into silence. So Seiichi immediately told them it was magic and quickly pushed her outside with Oliga's help. The next person was the gray-haired boy who introduced himself as Brud Kaiser, a prince of the Kaiser Empire. But as he made his introductions, Agnos got in his face and started telling him to stop ignoring him. Brud then told Seiichi that although they were in the same class, he wasn't on the same level as the slow-brained back-alley thug, who could not comprehend anything. But this only made Agnos challenge into a fight. Seiichi tried to get them to calm down, but they didn't listen until Beatrice used her notebook like a ninja star and gave them the stink eye, which sent them to their seats in the blink of an eye. Next was the girl, but she looked so uninterested that Seiichi had to ask if she had anything to say. Still looking away from him, she said her name was Helen Rosa, and when he asked if that was all, she glared at him. Taking the hint, he moved on to the barehead guy, who did a superhero pose before introducing himself as Baird Lutra, using a big placard. It surprised Seiichi that he was unable to talk, but Saria seemed to think he was cute. Seiichi then took one look at his weird-ass students and screamed, saying he wasn't sure if he could handle this group of wild students. Elsewhere in the school hallway, Kenisuke was trying to find Seiichi by sniffing him out like some dog. When she caught a whiff of his smell, she ran towards that direction, but as she rounded the corner, she bumped into Seto Aaron, the girl who had asked her about Seiichi before. She apologized for hitting her, and Aaron asked why she was in such a hurry. So Kenisuke explained that she'd caught a whiff of Seiichi's virgin hormones, which made Aaron run off in search of him before Kenisuke could say anything else. Later on, in Class F, Seiichi watched as Beatrice handed back the graded tests on herbalism to the students. Agnos was the first to receive his, but the nincompoop dared to be shocked when he heard he'd gotten a 0 like he had functioning brain cells. Brud took his next with a score of 90, and Seiichi praised him. When Baird's score was called, Seiichi recalled how he was scolded by Artoria for being so dumb that he couldn't differentiate medicinal herbs from mana mushrooms. He honestly couldn't believe Baird was smart enough to score a 95 despite looking like a dullard. Agnos started complaining that Baird had scored higher than him, but Brud told him it was because he didn't write down stupid answers like him. The two started bickering about who'd win in a fight with Baird using his cards to say his piece too, until Beatrice hit the table with her book, stopping the idiots mid-argument. They immediately flew to their seats in fear, and Seiichi wondered how scary she was when she called out Helen's perfect score of 100. Helen didn't seem to care, but Saria, who'd turned into a gorilla again, told her she was smart. When Seiichi noticed this, he and Oliga took her out of the classroom, leaving the students to ask Beatrice if it was possible to transform using magic. Outside in the hallway, Seiichi told Saria to stop going gorilla mode and scaring her classmates, and she happily agreed to stop, making Seiichi wonder if the muscle-headed gorilla actually understood what he just told her. When he stepped back into the classroom, he came face to face with Beatrice's chest and stepped back to avoid causing a plot incident. Beatrice only smiled and asked if he was interested in observing the students' physical abilities in a special lesson, which he agreed to do. As the students walked to the training room, they wondered just who Seiichi was, and since they had noticed Saria seemed close to him, they asked her about him. So Saria told them she was Seiichi's wife, shocking them into a picture-perfect JoJo pose. Brood then asked who Oliga was, and Saria said she was Seiichi's little sister. But when Helen asked if they had come together, Saria explained that they had also come along with Seiichi's girlfriend and servant. This revelation had Agnos running to find Seiichi to learn his extreme rizzing techniques. As they watched the idiot run off, Helen asked Saria if Seiichi was indeed a strong person, and she confirmed it, saying he was super strong. Meanwhile, Seiichi, Oliga, and Beatrice had gone back to Barnabas's office, and as he stroked his beard, he asked what Seiichi thought of his new students. Seiichi told him they were unique, but he didn't think they were the problem students he'd painted them out to be. Barnabas continued stroking his beard as he told Seiichi the Class F students were different from the other students at the school. So Seiichi asked what he meant by that. Instead of answering him, Barnabas asked if he knew the name the other students called the Class F students, and Seiichi had to remind the man that he'd just arrived at the school. So Beatrice told him they were called the Dropout Corps. She then explained that the students were suffering from a serious problem, which made Seiichi wonder what kind of problem would earn them such a name. Later on, the students finally made it to the training grounds, and just as Helen told them to try their best and show Seiichi they were not useless, students from another class arrived. Theobald, Brud's elder brother, wasted no time insulting and degrading them, as he told them they were not worthy of breathing the same air as he did, and when Brud tried to speak, he cut him off and asked him if being with numbskulls made him feel a little bit smarter. Agnos then stepped up to Theobald and tried to challenge him, but Brud told him to stand down, making Agnos argue that he wouldn't sit back and listen to a guy with plastic balls talking shit about them. He then tried to attack Theobald, but Baird held him back, so Theobald promised to show them the difference between Class S and the school's dropouts. Saria asked what he meant by Class S, so Helen explained that they were the top class at the academy. Theobald had just told them that whoever defied him would be crushed, when he noticed Saria standing amongst her classmates. He approached her and asked what her name was, which she told him, and he declared that she was now his woman. However, Saria smiled and told him she couldn't be with his pretentious ass since she already had a man. Theobald thought he misheard her and asked if she just turned him down, and Saria told him to eat dirt. He couldn't believe he'd just been turned down by a girl and said there was no man better than him. But Saria kept listing Seiichi's good qualities and praising him, causing Theobald to feel smaller with each word. Agnos found his displeasure amusing and started laughing at him, which made Theobald feel insulted, so he swore to deal with them. Not one to take no for an answer, Theobald tried to ask Saria to be his once again, but she said no so fast that he got burned physically. He tried to play it cool and pretend like he didn't just lose his dignity, so he turned and started walking away with his friends. Before he could go far, Agnos stopped him, saying he was a wimp for trying to tuck his tail and run. Theobald turned around, telling him not to push his luck, and said he had decided to leave them until the upcoming class competition. He told them he was going to annihilate them, and asked them to look forward to a record-breaking ass-whopping. As they walked away, Seiichi walked in, and when Saria called out to him, Theobald looked back and assessed the man she claimed was better than he was. Seiichi apologized for coming late to the lesson, and when Beatrice noticed the looks on their faces, she asked what was wrong. They'd brushed it aside, saying it was nothing, and asked Seiichi to commence the class. So he told them to show him their best skill, and announced he wouldn't use magic against them. Helena didn't seem to like that, so when Agnos said he'd be the first challenger, she told him to back off. He tried to argue with her, but when he noticed her bitch face, he did as he was told and backed off. Helen then turned to face Seiichi before she asked, and he was mocking her by saying he wasn't going to use magic. Seiichi tried to explain, but she cut him off, saying they were assessing his abilities and not the other way around. Helen stepped back and pulled out her blades before attacking him head-on, but Seiichi was able to dodge her attacks easily and managed to push her back. He was impressed by her ability, but asked why she was so mad at him when he hadn't done anything to her yet. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, Demiros and Angria were walking side by side when Angria proposed they play a game to see who killed more students at the academy. Demiros agreed, saying it had been a while since he saw the murder princess in action, and she told him she'd like to see his power of deliverance. However, he warned her that it wouldn't be easy to kill off the students because the holy mage Barnabas would be there. But Angria revealed her heart was racing with excitement at the thought of facing someone so powerful, and wondered what kind of terror and despair he'd show her. The match between Saichi and Helen continued, and she kept attacking him with all she had, not giving him the chance to fight back. He kept dodging her attacks, but when he tried to catch one of her blades, he glitched, and the blade passed right through, shocking him. While Syria and Oliga were worried for him, Agnos and Brud praised Helen for showing her skill and defending her title as the Twin Crimson Blades. Helen then pointed her blade at Saichi and challenged him to use his magic before charging at him using a skill called Twin Fang Thrust. But somehow she ended up falling and was caught by Saichi. Helen started struggling to get out of his arms, and Agnos couldn't believe how fast Saichi had moved. As she kept struggling against Saichi, he accidentally touched one of her plots, so she accused him of sampling her all along like a closet creep and punched him in the face, giving him a nosebleed. Agnos laughed and said he'd take him on next, but Brud stopped him and suggested they take Saichi on together. Brud then asked Saichi if he was okay with it, and although he agreed, he wondered if they would be able to work together, because from what he'd noticed in the classroom, they didn't get along very well. After discussing amongst themselves, Agnos was the first to attack Saichi, but he dodged. While dodging his attacks, Baird attacked him from the left, but he managed to block in time. They kept attacking simultaneously until he stood in the center of the room, and the three boys attacked at the same time. So Saichi grabbed both their hands. Brud used the opportunity to try and strike Saichi, but he had no idea he'd been taking sword fighting lessons from Zoro until Saichi stopped his sword with his teeth. He then jumped in the air and used a magic circle to push himself back as he used a skill called Flash Fist, which was a rip-off of Sing's Buddhist palm move from the movie Kung Fu Hustle, and it took them down with an explosion that was felt by Barnabas in his office. Oliga and Syria ran to Saichi, singing his praises, but their mini celebration was cut short by Agnos, who slammed his fists against the floor as he called himself a failure. Beatrice stood watching her precious students with sad eyes as they cried and berated themselves for being failures. And this made Saichi feel bad, because his merciless ass-whopping was the cause of their current state. So he used his world vision and discovered they had a condition that was preventing them from activating magic. Saichi then remembered his conversation with Beatrice and Barnabas in his office, where Beatrice told him they were unable to use magic. She further explained that their inability to use magic had led to them being bullied by those who could, and he realized they had lost all hope. He understood their predicament since he used to be the mayor of Bullyville. Saichi then wiped his eyes and announced that he was going to save them, but Agnos told him to stop lying capping unnecessarily. However, Saichi promised to prove to the world that they could use magic and make a weird pose. He thought of a way to liberate them and break their chains and saw the image of President Lincoln. Saichi remembered he'd used the spell before and almost activated the spell President Link, but he stopped it immediately. He tried again, and when he figured it out, he stretched his hands out, activated a magic circle, and created a new spell called Events that led me to teaching failures in another world. Because unlike his terrible looks that changed, his shitty naming game was still ass. Immediately the students started glowing, and the chains binding them broke. So an excited Helen tried using fire magic, and for the first time in her life, she was able to use magic. Baird was able to break the floor, and Brud did a funny song before he used Fall Disaster. But since he was an idiot, he made the same mistake Saichi did the first time he used the spell and nearly drowned himself. Agnos was the last, and he used his finger to produce fire, but the half-wit set his pompadour on fire in the process, so Brud helped him put it out with the Fall Disaster spell. They noticed Helen laughing and joined her as they celebrated their new abilities, after which they thanked Saichi for helping them and promised to hone their skills every day, and for the first time, they called him Sensei. Meanwhile, outside on the school grounds, Artoria was busy reading when Kanazuki started sniffing her like she was a treat, which made her uncomfortable. Kanazuki then demanded to know why she had Saichi's wild beastly smell, but Artoria ran off thinking she'd lost her marbles. Later on in the cafeteria, while Saichi and the girls were busy scolding Lulun for speaking with her mouth full, Kanazuki, who had been walking past them, stopped. She called Seiichi's name, which made him turn around, and the moment he said her name she ran towards him and hugged him, shocking everyone except Lulun, who was busy eating. While all that was happening, Angriat and Demioros had gotten to the gates of the academy. Angriat tried to destroy the barrier, but her magic was useless against it, so she compelled the guards and made them open the gates for them. Everyone but Artoria watched in awe as Kanazuki hugged a surprised Seiichi. As he tried to get her off him, Artoria appeared beside him. Looking like a woman scorned and demanded he tell her who Kanazuki was. She called him a two-timing skirt chaser and asked if she and Saria weren't enough for him. Seiichi tried to explain, but she went all Street Fighter on him, causing Beatrice to scold them for acting like little children. After that, Kanazuki told him she had sensed his presence and went around looking for him. But before he could say anything, she started sniffing him and pointed out that he smelt like many different women. She then turned to the girls and asked why they all smelt like him, promising to go easy on them if they gave her satisfying answers. Suddenly the scene switched to a Dragon Ball rip-off of Planet Namek, with each girl doing a Super Saiyan charge-up. They then shot their titles in the form of energy blasts, as though they were doing the Kamehameha at Kanazuki, who equally shot hers but was overwhelmed by the combined power of the three girls. However, their victory celebration was cut short when Oliga pointed out that she was still standing. Just as Kanazuki laughed and called them weak, they heard Saria's voice. When they turned to look at her, she was being carried like a shogun by shadow clones of herself. She then proceeded to introduce herself as Seiichi's wife, before using Goku's finishing move, the Spirit Bomb, but in her case, the Spirit Bomb word wife, and shot it at Kanazuki, taking her down. Back at the cafeteria, Seiichi ran to Kanazuki and picked her up while asking if she was okay. She dramatically told him she was glad to be held by him before proceeding to fake her death, so he told her he'd take her to the nurse's office. Saria asked Kanazuki if she loved Seiichi, and she explained that he was just her childhood friend. Saria then told her she loved Seiichi and proceeded to list all that she loved about him. The other girls also listed the things they loved about him, causing him to blush. Listening to them caused Kanazuki to fire up, but she calmed down and told them how Seiichi had saved her from bullies when they were younger. She explained that the incident was what led to him getting bullied every day, but she wasn't brave enough to stand up for him as he had done for her. After her explanation, Seiichi apologized to the girls for deceiving them and revealed that he came from another world. Trying to prove to them that what he was saying was true, he transformed back to his old overweight self, surprising them. They took their discussion outside, and as the girls sat around the fountain, Seiichi explained that he was a garbage-smelling, unwanted loser that radiated failure before eating the fruit of evolution. Kanazuki apologized for revealing his secret, but Seiichi told her she did nothing wrong, saying that the truth would have eventually come out. He put on his robe and said that even if he wore it, he would not be the Seiichi they all knew and loved. Saria transformed into her gorilla self and told him that even if she was a gorilla, she was still Saria, so even if his ugly face was the reason bullying was invented, as long as he doesn't ruin their eyes by transforming into his constipated form, she'll still love him. Artoria added that he had accepted her, even though she was cursed with bad luck, while Oliga reminded him that even though she was a stone-cold killer, he accepted her, and Lulun said he'd given her food. Saria turned back to a human and explained that they all loved him, but asked him to have more confidence in himself. As Kanazuki watched them, she told Seiichi she was glad he found people who cared about him. When she tried to leave, Seiichi stopped her and told her he was happy to have her in his life, but Kanazuki told him it was best he stayed away from her. He asked why, so she explained that the heroes were treated like outcasts, and she didn't want the students to find out they were from the same world. She said it was her turn to protect him, but as she turned to leave, Oliga noticed the bracelet she was wearing and remembered her enslavement collar. She got scared and clung to Seiichi fearfully, which made him ask what the problem was. She pointed at Kanazuki's wrist, and when he saw the bracelet, he asked where she had gotten it. Kanazuki told him it was given to them by the Kaiser Empire because it would help raise their status, but when Seiichi appraised it, he discovered it was an enslavement bracelet. Suddenly, his aura became dark, his eyes changed and he saw himself in a white void with a one-eyed shadow. When the shadow got closer to him, Seiichi suddenly screamed and released a surge of pitch-black darkness, which swept over everyone and even reached the demon realm. It knocked Kanazuki and most of the students out before breaking their enslavement bracelets. He was so lost in his anger that he didn't hear the girls calling out to him. In a white void, the shadow was about to swallow him whole, but he came to his senses when he heard Saria call his name. In the real world, Seiichi had snapped back, and the girls crowded him, asking if he was okay. Before he could respond, he noticed Kanazuki lying on the floor, so he went to check if she was doing fine. When she came to, he explained that the bracelets were used to control the mind of the wearer. She asked why they would do such a thing, and Barnabas, who had just arrived, told her it was because they wanted to use them as tools to fight the demon lord. He explained that even though the Windward Kingdom was trying to ally with the demons, the Kaiser Empire was looking for ways to stop them and other nations from trying to do the same, so they might have had plans to use the heroes against those nations as well. He said it was a good thing the bracelets had been broken, and thanked Seiichi, but told them to keep everything they knew a secret before leaving. Seiichi then promised Kanazuki he'd protect her no matter what happened, but their moment was ruined by Lulan's stomach-singing Aote rumbling soundtrack. Seiichi asked the greedy donkey why she was already hungry when she had just eaten, so she told him that was the past, and this is now. They decided to head back in, but Kanzuki stopped Seiichi and asked if she could join their group with a new role, so he asked what role she wanted, and Kanazuki said she'd take on the role of their older sister. Seiichi looked appalled, and as they argued about it, they didn't notice Eren watching them. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, Demi-Rose and Angria were having coffee, talking about the surge they had felt when Helios appeared in their cups. The disgusted duo asked what he wanted, and he informed them that the enslavement bracelets were broken. However, they didn't care. He explained that their plans to cause trouble in the academy using the heroes were now destroyed, but Demi-Rose cut him off, saying they were going to handle things themselves. He then asked if they had felt the surge from earlier, and Angria asked what had caused it. Helio claimed he had no idea what it was but informed them that it had increased the strength of the Demon Lord's darkness. Just as he urged them to work hard, Demi-Rose stirred his coffee to cut the connection. Days later, while in his classroom, Seiichi reminded the students of the upcoming class competition, and although Agnos was aching to fight, Brute asked Seiichi to help them train, so they could stand a chance against Class S. He was hesitant at first, but when he saw the looks on their faces, he agreed to do it. At the training ground, Baird held Seiichi in place with stones, giving the other three the chance to shoot fire and ice spells at him, but when Seiichi tried to repel the attack, he glitched again. He quickly created a sort of barrier to avoid getting hit with the spells, which caused the students to complain because they weren't able to beat him, but Seiichi wasn't paying attention to what they were saying. He was lost in thought, wondering why he had glitched, and recalled the same thing had happened when he was fighting against Helen earlier. However, his attention was called back to the students when Beatrice asked his opinion on their abilities so far. Seiichi told them that they were improving greatly and said he was sure they would be able to take on Class S when the time came. As they stood laughing and teasing each other, Theobald and his minions arrived. Agnos asked if they had come to spy on them, but he said they had come to train, so he could make them kneel before him as the emperor. The moment the words left his mouth, Helen got angry and drew her blades before taking an attack stance. When Theobald saw the blades, he asked if she was from the Volscia Empire, but she said nothing and only looked at him with rage. He simply laughed and told her that it wouldn't take long for her small nation to fall under the control of the Kaiser Empire, which made her try to attack him, but Baird held her back. Brut approached his brother and told him that dominating others by force would lead nowhere. When he mentioned Seiichi's name, his brother asked if it was the same man Saria had mentioned before, which she confirmed. Theobald then challenged Seiichi, but Brut told him that his opponents would be the members of Class F, saying that they would prove Seiichi was the best by beating them in the class competition. So Theobald welcomed the challenge before he walked away with his friends. Helen then approached Seiichi and begged him to make her stronger, which he agreed to, and soon began their slightly intense training for the upcoming class competition. The day before the competition, Agnos and Brud were in the bath discussing their chances in the games when Baird walked in, causing them to be shocked that he still had his bare head on even though he'd come to take a bath. Brud said he'd heard that every anime character using a mask was extremely handsome, while the stupid Agnos bet that he was just as ugly as his ugly mask. Just then, Seiichi walked in and they couldn't stop staring at his hot body, calling it a class S, which was sus by the way. Seiichi noticed their stares and did a weird-ass pose, which effectively killed the mood. Meanwhile, in the girls' bath, Beatrice apologized to Helen for being a worthless teacher unlike Seiichi, who managed to unlock their true potential. But Helen told her that it was because of her they had worked so hard, and assured her that they would do their best during the competition. The next day, Angriate and Demuros were shopping when they were approached by a silver-haired boy, who threatened them, saying that if they weren't able to do their jobs properly, they would not get a second chance. Meanwhile, at the academy, students had gathered in the arena to watch the class competitions, and the first match was between Class F and Class S. Barnabas announced that it would be an elimination round, and the first team to have all its members defeated would be the loser of the round. While all of this was going on, Seichi was fighting for his life in the toilet, because Lulun had fed him some bad food. Back in the arena, Theobald and Bird were about to face off against each other when Barnabas was suddenly bound by Demuros' golden rings. However, the disgusting degenerate was getting excited as he struggled against them, which had the students wondering what kind of weird kinks the old fucker was into. A magic circle, which shot a light beam onto the ring, appeared above the arena, and when it cleared up, Angriate and Demuros stood there. They introduced themselves as apostles of the Great Devil Order, and at that moment the sky turned red, and an eye peered down into the arena, causing the students to panic. Demuros told them to shut up while Angria announced that they needed them to die before snapping her fingers and erecting light walls around the arena. Some students tried to take the wall down with fire spells, but it absorbed it and used it against them, causing them to disappear. The remaining students who witnessed this started panicking, and those who got close to the wall were sucked into it. Beatrice tried to calm them down, while the two apostles were enjoying the screams of the scared children like Drake's new album. Theobald tried to attack using a spell, but it was useless, and Angrieve sent one back, which missed his head by a hair before hitting the wall and exploding. When he turned to face her, she and Demuros had disappeared, but she reappeared behind him and touched his friends, who became mindless puppets under her control. They attacked Theobald and overpowered him, but just as they were about to deliver the final blow, his brother pushed him out of the way, saving his life. Theobald scolded him for interfering, and when Brud tried to argue, Angriette joined their conversation. Theobald told him to speak to him with respect, because he was the next emperor of the Kaiser Empire, and when she heard this, she announced that their death would cause a lot of despair in their empire, and ordered her puppets to kill them, but they were saved by Agnos, who used a fire spell on the puppets. Brud suggested they work together to take the apostles down, but Helen said she'd only work together with asshole Theo if Brud gave the order. Theobald looked at his friends lying unconscious on the floor and agreed to their plan. The Class S students attacked first, but Angriette easily sent them flying with a spell, which gave Theobald the chance to attack her, but she managed to block his attacks and stabbed him, just as she was giving him her villain speech. He called her a fool before taking her umbrella away, and that's when she noticed he'd used defense magic, because he had anticipated her move. While she was still speaking, the Class F students used the same moves they had used against Sadichi during training to attack her. Since she wasn't able to block in time, she got hit and her mask broke off in the process, which made her switch from sweet to psycho in an instant. This time, she attacked them with her full power, because she was done playing with them and intended to kill them. Demuros, who was acting as his speculator and commentator, explained that her mask not only hid her burned face but also hid her true powers. He also said that flames were born when she first burned her face, saying they were hell flames that burned everything. Angria laughed like a raging lunatic as he approached Helen, and as she looked at her, she told Helen that seeing her pretty face made her want to burn it up. But just as she was about to burn her face, Beatrice threw her trusty notebook at her. Enraged, Angria turned to face her, but Beatrice told the bitch to shove her insecurities up her ass. Angria found it amusing that Beatrice would dare challenge her, so she said since she was so brave and wanted to protect her students, she'd like to see her try before using her magic to turn Agnos into her puppet. She ordered him to attack Beatrice, who only dodged his attacks and refused to strike back. Beatrice tried to talk him back to his senses, but Angria informed her that he'd only listened to her voice before ordering him to tell Beatrice his mind. Agnos then told Beatrice he was able to use magic because of Seichi, saying she had nothing to do with it, which made Beatrice's self-esteem drop like a cancelled celebrity's rating after hearing his words, and as she struggled not to cry, Angria took pleasure in her despair. Agnos threw punch after punch, and Beatrice used her notebook as a shield, as Brud and Helen tried to convince her that Agnos didn't mean the words he'd said. They approached them so they could try and stop him, but Beatrice told them to stop, saying it was her punishment for being useless. Just as Agnos punched her in the face, Angria ordered him to finish her off, but Beatrice stood her ground and hit him on the head with her notebook, which made him stop for a moment. Angria screamed at him to attack, But he stood still, and Bird realized that because Beatrice had always hit him on the head, his body remembered it, which was why he was resisting Angria's commands. Angria screamed at him again, but her words were lost as the mask covering his face broke off, releasing him from her hold. Beatrice then turned to face Angria and threw her notebook like a boomerang before creating a magic circle. She then jumped in the air, landed on the notebook, and came crashing down on Angria, knocking her out once and for all, and sending the students into a clapping frenzy. Beatrice approached Agnos, who started apologizing for what he had said. He told her that even though he was dumb, he would never intentionally do anything to hurt her, and asked her to forgive him. However, Beatrice smiled, tapped his head with her notebook, and told him everything was fine. While they teased Agnos, Demi-Rose tried to remind them he was still there, but they ignored him as he stood there looking like a forgotten piece of furniture. Annoyed that he was being treated like an NPC, Demi-Rose lifted Barnabas into the air and tightened the rings around his body, making the old fart scream in pleasure, which finally drew their attention to him. Demi-Rose had just asked Beatrice what she planned to do when Angria raised her head and begged him to lend her his power so she could fight with him. But Demi-Rose looked at her and said he was done with her. Angria asked how he could betray a fellow apostle, but he told her she wasn't an apostle, which surprised her. He then explained that a true apostle of the Great Devil Order was someone who had received a portion of the Demon Lord's powers and was able to use them. He revealed that those who had received the power had a crest, which appeared as proof of that, and asked her if she had a crest. Demi-Rose told her that she was only useful for her intellect and magical abilities, but now that she had been defeated, she was of no use to him anymore. The look of despair on her face made him happy, and he said that was just what the Demon Lord needed to be revived, so Angria screamed as she turned into a purple mist that was absorbed by the eye in the sky. With Angria gone, Demi-Rose turned to face Beatrice, and the two engaged in a fierce battle, but Beatrice was on the losing end. When he punched her to the wall, her students tried to come to her aid, but she stopped them, saying she could take all of him by herself. So she stood up and took off her jacket and glasses. Beatrice then released her power, which swirled around her like a mini tornado before channeling it through her notebook and firing it at Demi-Rose. However, it did not affect him and only managed to rip his clothes in different places. He then charged at her with lightning speed as he clapped her cheeks back to back, not giving her the chance to fight back. Seeing that Beatrice was getting her ass handed to her, the students tried to help her, so they threw their various spells at him, but he countered all of them and sent them flying into a wall. Beatrice screamed as she saw the state they were in, and Demi-Rose told her that the despair she would feel after the death of her precious students would go a long way to fuel the Demon Lord. He turned to look at the students, but Beatrice stood in his way, which made him ask if she was willing to die for them. Beatrice said nothing, so Demi-Rose approached her and told her to get out of the way, but she told him as an educator it was her duty to protect her students. Seeing that she was determined to stop him, Demi-Rose decided to kill her instead, but when he moved to strike her, Seiichi stopped his hands. He asked Seiichi to let go, but when he ignored him, he shot a beam at Seiichi, who moved out of the way at lightning speed. Seiichi put Beatrice down and asked Syria and Olga to watch over everyone before turning around and approaching Demi-Rose. As he approached him, Demi-Rose looked scared, but all Seiichi did was ask if he was the one who had caused all the destruction. When he got no answer, his eyes changed, and it was at that moment Demi-Rose knew he fucked. So he tried to defend himself and created a lot of magic circles, which shot light beams like Seiichi. Seiichi dodged them all and got close enough to him to give him a punch that sent him flying into the eye in the sky. With Demi-Rose gone, the light walls that had been put up disappeared, and Barnabas was set free from his binds. Beatrice and the students ran towards Seiichi, praising him for his victory against Demi-Rose, while Brud helped his brother up. As they watched the celebration, Theobald asked Brud if he would mock him for losing the battle, but Brud said no and explained that they still had a lot to learn. He told his brother they had to get stronger, and Theobald huffed before walking away. Elsewhere in an unknown location, the silver-haired boy and 3 other men sat discussing Demi-Rose and Angria's defeat. The masked man informed them that he had summoned them to discuss the way forward, so the red-haired man announced he'd strike first. Back at the arena, Seiichi asked who Demi-Rose and Angria were, and the blockhead Agnos said they were the Mecha siblings, but Barnabas corrected him, saying they were the Great Devil Order. He told them a great battle was coming up and trying to act cute and cuddle as he asked them to work together to defeat the enemy. But they weren't paying attention. They also didn't notice Demiuros try to shoot a light beam at Seiichi until Eren screamed his name, but it was too late, so she became his willing meat shield and got hit. They both fell to the ground unmoving, and Demiuros disappeared, leaving the students to wonder if they were okay or not. See you guys in the next video. Seiichi and Eren found themselves in an unknown place, and when Eren spoke to him, Seiichi asked who she was as he couldn't remember her. She introduced herself, but the bonehead started to imagine every item that rhymed with her name until a voice offered to explain things to the simpleton. Surprised by the voice, Eren asked who it was, and instead of giving them the answer, it told them they were in the underworld. The two started freaking out because they couldn't understand how they died, so the voice then explained that to return to the world of the living, they must find the gate of the living and pass through it. It told them they had to pass a series of tests before they could find the gate, and the first test was an ultra quiz, where Seiichi would have to answer questions about his life by picking yes or no. Seiichi asked what would happen if he got an answer wrong, and he was told he'd fall into the river Styx. The first question was if Eren had fallen in love with him at first sight, which shocked him because he had no idea she had feelings for him. Seiichi tried to ask Eren, but she was tied and gagged, so she wasn't able to answer him. He got on a speedboat and circled the river as he contemplated his answer. He noticed Eren trying to tell him something, but he couldn't understand her and felt she was shaking because she had to pee. Deciding to bet it all on his hunch, Seiichi drove the boat through the wall marked X and landed on a bridge. Since he guessed correctly, the video clip of the answer was shown to him. The video showed that he had met Eren on the rooftop of their middle school and had given her his chopstick after hers fell on the floor. Since that day, they always ate lunch together since they didn't fit in with the other students. However, one day Seiichi asked if the reason she ate on the roof was because she was being bullied like he was, so Eren told him that wasn't the case and explained that she did not know how to talk to people. Seiichi asked how she was able to talk to him, and she admitted that he was an easy person to talk to. She also said she wasn't pretty, so no one would like to be associated with her, but Seiichi told her to have more confidence in herself. He said she was a good listener and thought she was cute, so she gained more confidence and talked to people the way she spoke to him. Back in the underworld, the voice explained that Eren gradually fell in love with him as they chatted on the roof each day. Seiichi finally remembered who she was, and Eren told him that he was the reason she had become who she was now, as she made a vow to protect him at all costs. Meanwhile, in the Wimberg Empire, King Rans had just informed Gussel that the demons sent him a letter officially requesting an alliance, but the musclehead was busy doing bridges. When Rans asked where Eris was, she answered while swinging her whip, and that was when he realized she'd tied up for her mini hentai fest. In the Demon Kingdom, Lucia also informed her commanders about the alliance with the Wimberg Kingdom. Back in the underworld, Seiichi and Eren made it to the final obstacle, and there they met the ancestors of the Mohawks, who were equally as weird as their descendants. They told Seiichi he had to pass through a labyrinth to be able to find the gate of the living, but he had to get through them too. The leader also told Seiichi to make sure he protected his back door, because if they managed to use Kakashi's 1,000 years of pain technique on him, he would be as good as dead. The challenge began and they moved around the labyrinth like they were in a Pac-Man game, getting chased by the Mohawks, but Eren was able to use the technique on the two lackeys. Even though Seiichi thought it was gross, he gave it a try, but unfortunately, his fingers couldn't penetrate the leader's buns of steel. The leader laughed and asked him to join their clan, saying he'd enjoy it, but Seiichi refused them and started fighting like Chitaro, complete with his battle cry. He managed to take the minions down, leaving only the leader standing, and he promised his comrades he would avenge them. Eren and Seiichi used the opportunity to run away, but the leader caught up with them after Eren fell. He told Seiichi he wouldn't let him pass and proceeded to activate their clan's ancient technique called the Rose Fist. Coincidentally, the technique produced a strong wind that threw Seiichi against a wall and held him in place for the leader to deliver the blow. Seiichi lay unmoving on the floor with a hole in his robe as Eren called out to him. The leader stood watching, as he told Seiichi he was impressed he lasted long enough. Seiichi stood up and decided to take him down by using just his fist, and the leader ended up losing, which allowed Seiichi and Eren to get to the gate and return home. When Seiichi opened his eyes, he met the teary eyes of his family and friends, who all thought he'd died. Their celebration was short-lived as an injured Louise came calling out to Seiichi. The group ran to her, leaving a very suspicious-looking Eren behind as they fawned over Louise, who had fainted. days before Louise appeared injured at the academy. Rans had tasked her to bring Seiichi back so he could be present during the summit between the humans and demons. Meanwhile, the guild was holding auditions for new members in the town, but their expectations were not met by the contestants who were rejected for various reasons. They had lost all hope until a purple rose was thrown at Gussel's head, and a blonde man in a top hat and monocle glasses announced he was going to be the winner. The sus man baby threw one of his bottles at him, and he swirled the bottle like a professional barman. He mentioned its qualities before drinking from the bottle, and said it was packed with a mother's love for her child. Next, Pervy Mohawk challenged him to keep up with his hip thrusts, which he did. But when it looked like he wasn't able to keep up, Gussel pointed out that he was moving so fast it looked like he was slowing down. Mohawk was so impressed, he declared him a super stud, and Gussel joined them before asking the blondie to show him what he could do. The man turned to him, and Gussel suddenly gripped his shoulders. He went full gym head and started analyzing his perfectly sculpted body from his strong biceps to his chiseled abs. Blondie smiled and took off his shirt before he began flexing his muscles, making Gussel declare him the winner of the Nobel Prize for Muscles. He then announced he was the newest member of the guild, so Eris and the others congratulated him. The bells started ringing, signaling the time of the summit had arrived, so they left to help the king welcome the demons. The palace gates opened, and Lucia, together with Leah and 2 other commanders, entered. They were met by Rans and members of the guild, who welcomed them to their kingdom. Meanwhile, in Kryze's cave, he was speaking to Hilio through the orb, and he told him everything was going as planned, saying Lucia and Rans were wasting their time. In the Kaiser Empire, as Zekia walked through the castle, he remembered the former emperor and wondered where the empire was headed. He felt ashamed of himself because he was nothing more than a puppet, who did the emperor's bidding. He soon came across a slightly open door, and when he walked in, he overheard Hilio tell Kiers that the Kaiser Empire belonged to the Great Devil Order, since he'd managed to sow seeds of discord and despair amongst the people, which kept producing negative energy to fuel the Demon Lord's revival. Zekia confronted the old fart, who told him that he could do nothing to stop their plans right before he disappeared. Armed with the knowledge of the Great Devil Order's plans, Zekia rode towards the Wimberg Empire to seek help. As he rode, he recalled that the former emperor had entrusted the empire's safety to him and asked him to work with other nations to defend it. He kept riding until the Wimberg Empire came into view, but he was attacked by the silver-haired Shirt King, who was one of the apostles of the Great Devil Order. Zekia warned him not to stand in his way, but the boy told him the world would be plunged into chaos. He then proceeded to toy with Zekia by appearing and disappearing. The boy soon slipped on a rock, giving Zekia the chance to attack, but he stopped his sword with his finger. Zekia stepped back, but his knees were shaking, and he asked the boy who he was. The boy didn't answer and fired black orbs from his hands at Zekia, melting his armor and injuring him in the process. When the boy stopped, Zekia asked him what he wanted, but the boy placed his palm on his cheek and burned his face, causing Zekia to fall. He struggled to stand and tried to attack, but the boy used the black energy and broke his sword to pieces. Zekia remembered the old emperor had given him the sword and the title Emperor's Sword, which made him scream in rage and activate a large magic circle, transforming his sword into the magic gem sword, Thifja. He stabbed the floor and sent a wave of energy towards the boy, but he used defense magic to deflect the attack. When the dust cleared up, the boy called him a disappointment and tried to cut him, but Louise blocked the strike with her sword. She asked Zekia if he was okay, but the defeated knight told her to run away and save herself. Louise told him not to speak and tried to attack the boy, but he dodged her attacks until he found an opening and sent her flying. Louise hit her back against a tree and admitted he was strong, but said he wasn't as strong as Seiichi. Zekia then told her to stop testing her luck, but Louise told him not to be foolish, and as they argued, the boy shot a large ball of dark energy towards her. Louise was frozen in place, so Zekia jumped in front of her and bore the burn of the attack. The spell melted off his armor and burnt his chest, and as Louise ran to check on him, the boy remembered a time he was helpless against a monster, but a woman had stood in front of him. He soon got tired of watching the two and walked away before disappearing, leaving Louise to worry over Zekia. While she fussed over him, he revealed all he had learned about the Great Devil Order and entrusted everything to her before dying. Later on in a carriage, Louise had just told Seiichi and Saria what had happened with Zekia. But she also mentioned that if what Zekia had told her was true, then the summit Rans was holding would be in danger. Saria assured her that everything would be fine since Rans and the guild members were around, and Seiichi promised to her that the alliance pushed through. Meanwhile, the summit was underway, but things weren't going as planned because each side had immature brats, posing as adults who soon started fighting. Victor had to remind them that they had come to make peace with one another, which made them start crying and hugging each other as they apologized. This weird state was how Seiichi and the girls found them when they opened the doors to the room. Rans noticed them and went to speak to Seiichi, but as they talked he saw the bandage on Luis's head and asked what had happened. After Luis had related the events that happened in the past few days to them, Rans and Lucia signed the agreement and forged the alliance between the two kingdoms. Shortly after Seiichi and Saria left the academy with Luis, Erin started behaving strangely, and it was revealed that she wasn't the real Erin. The imposter disguised as Erin went into the boys' bathroom, and when they saw her they told her to leave, but she said she had come to crush them to make Seiichi feel despair. Agnos asked if dying had messed with her brain cells, but she smiled evilly and attacked him. He managed to block the attack and asked her what her problem was, but she changed into Saria and punched him in the face. The boys had no idea she was a fake and thought she was using transformation magic, but she changed into Saria's gorilla form and took them out in one strike like bowling pins. When Agnos commented on her strength, she revealed that she was Jempel the Doppelganger, one of the top 4 of the Great Devil Order. With the boys unconscious, he went after Lulun next, but when he tried to stab her, she used her ponytail to hit the knife out of his hands and declared that her food was hers alone, proving once more that she had the same IQ as Patrick Starr. Jempel, who pretended to be Erin, told her he wasn't after her food, so the two sat to talk, but when Lulun asked why he had snuck up on her, he got scared thinking she had caught on to his ruse. However, Lulun wasn't the brightest or the smartest donkey, so she assumed Jempel was hungry. She then cut her Bakuden into 2 and gave 1 piece to him, as a sort of thank you gift for trying to save Seiichi before. Lulun admitted that she never shared her food, but she considered Erin her friend, so it didn't matter, which surprised Jempel because even his parents didn't care for him. He started crying, so Lulun asked if he was okay, but he lied that his allergies were acting up, but Lulun told him food tasted better with friends. She then declared they were best friends, but the overwhelming emotions were too much for him, so he ran off. Later that night, as Alaga stood outside, Jempel approached her as Lulun with the plan to snap her neck once she got close to him. But Alaga pulled out an umbrella and offered to share it with him. Jempel then recalled how he was bullied by some kids after they took his umbrella, so he asked her why she was giving him her umbrella. Alaga told him, thinking he was Lulun, that even though she was a greedy, insatiable donkey, she shared her food with her, and because of that, she was her friend. Jempel got emotional, so he handed the umbrella back and ran off. Still disguised as Lulun, Jempel walked through the hallways complaining about how nice the girls were, until he noticed Artoria and decided to go after her disguised as Seiichi. Meanwhile, the real Seiichi and Saria had stopped to get some snacks on their way back to the academy when Saria came across the silver-haired boy. The moment he laid eyes on her, he remembered someone who looked like her but pushed the thoughts aside. Saria asked if he was okay, and he told her yes. Just then, Seiichi joined them. When Saria mentioned Seiichi's name, the boy approached him and started suppling up to him. So Seiichi asked why he was alone in such a place. The boy said he was seeking some fun, and then he asked Seiichi if he was happy. Seiichi told him that he was, but the boy didn't seem to like that response, so he bid them farewell and turned to leave. Back at the academy, Jempel approached Artoria as Seiichi, and when she asked why he was back without Saria, he told her that he came back because he wanted to be alone with her, saying she was the only person he had eyes for, which surprised her. He then asked for a hug, so he could stab her in the back, but he never expected Artoria to beat the living shit out of him. As Jempel lay bleeding on the floor, he wondered if giving and his whooping was her love language. Artoria apologized for going crazy on him and admitted that she was worried when he died, but she was glad he came back. She told him that since he accepted her, she was willing to accept all of him, both the good and bad. Jempel thought back to his own life and how no one ever accepted, so he asked Artoria why she accepted him since he was trying to delude himself into believing her words were directed at him. Artoria got red-faced and said it was because she loved him, shocking him into silence before she asked him to hug her. Still in shock, Jempel wondered how good of a person Seiichi was that everyone loved him, which made Artoria think he was ignoring her, so she punched him again. Curiosity soon got the best of him, so he decided to spend time at the academy as Saichi to see why everyone loved him so much. Until one day, he was having a picnic with Barnabas and the girls when he suddenly remembered he abandoned his mission. Artoria asked Barnabas what he wanted to discuss with them, but before he could speak, he was interrupted by the arrival of an ugly-ass troll. Jempel said it was awakened by the demon lord's energy, causing Barnabas to look at him. The troll attacked, so everyone jumped out of the way, and Barnabas tried to use a spell, but Jempel jumped in front of the girls, and when the troll noticed his eyes, it ran away. When the troll was gone, Barnabas told them that he had sensed an evil presence around the academy. He said the person was an assassin sent by the Great Devil Order, but he wasn't able to sense his presence anymore. Oligan noticed Jempel's expression and asked what was wrong, but before he could answer, Kanazuki appeared. She told them that the man with them wasn't Saichi, as he could fool their eyes but not their nose. Artoria asked if she had any proof, and she called Aaron out and explained that she found her in the chicken coop. She told Jempel that even though he could copy Saichi's face, he couldn't copy his disgusting body odor. Not needing to pretend anymore, Jempel changed back to himself and introduced himself as one of the top 4 of the Great Devil Order. He admitted he had used the commotion caused by the fight in the arena to swap places with Aaron. Artoria demanded to know why he did that, and he said he planned to kill them all in front of Saichi. But since he started living as him for a while and got to know them, he didn't think he could go through with it. Jempel then told them he was going to find someone to love and accept him just as they had done for Saichi and live a happy life. He bid them farewell and walked away. But Artoria asked if it was okay to let him go, and Barnabas said if he wanted to kill them, he'd have done that, so it was better to believe he had changed. Outside the city, a cloaked person appeared before Jempel, and he informed him that he was leaving the order to find happiness. But the person didn't like the news, so he killed Jempel before disappearing. Meanwhile, in the Wimberg Empire, Gussel and the other adventurers were celebrating the alliance when Vitor decided to put his plans in motion. That night, when everyone had passed out from drinking too much, someone attacked the pacifier man. The next morning, Victor decided to play Sherlock Holmes as he took pictures of the crime scene. Gussel declared him dead, but Eris checked his pulse and said he was alive. However, Gussel was so caught up playing detective that he ignored her words and swore to catch the one responsible. He and Victor took charge of the investigation, and when he asked Victor to analyze one of the baby feeders found at the scene, Eris looked like she was going to slap someone. Vitor noted the milk was still warm after drinking from the bottle and said the time of death was between the night before and that morning, but this only made Eris confused. They looked around the room, and when Gussel told them the investigation was leading nowhere, Victor suggested they take a break and get something to drink. Gussel noticed the bottle in Pacifier Man's hand and tried to drink the contents, but Eris screamed, saying it was evidence. Her screaming only startled Gussel, who ended up dropping the bottle and breaking it in the process, which caused Eris to whip him for being stupid. They then moved on to interrogate the guild members one by one, and Eris couldn't believe how stupid the pair was being. After their so-called interrogations, they erected a gravestone for Pacifier Man, and as Eris tried to tell them he wasn't dead, Pacifier Man crawled out of the grave. He stood up and stretched out, saying he had slept well, and Gussel, with tears streaming down his eyes, revealed how glad he was that he was still alive. Pacifier Man asked what was going on, and Eris asked him to tell them what happened to him the night before. He explained that he was taking a piss when he slipped on one of his many bottles and fell, which caused him to hit his head and pass out. Everyone but Eris found the explanation amusing, so Gussel declared the case closed. As Eris watched Victor and Gussel shake hands, she wondered why he had mentioned the Great Devil Order during the investigations. Meanwhile, Saichi finally returned to the academy, and he informed them of the alliance between the demons and the Wimberg Kingdom, and also warned them of the unavoidable war against the Great Devil Order. He also told his students that he would entrust the safety of the academy to them. Later that night, in the Wimberg Kingdom, Eris was walking down a dark alley when she sensed someone behind her. She turned around and came face to face with Victor, who told her that he was aching to beat her. Eris asked who he was, and he introduced himself as a priest of the Great Devil Order, Victor the Resonance, after which he tried to attack her, but she jumped out of the way and whipped him. Victor wasn't affected, so he charged at her and punched her stomach, since he took gender equality seriously even with fights. Eris fell on her knees, and just as he was about to deliver the final blow, Gussel caught his fist. He demanded to know what he was doing, so Victor claimed he and Eris were training, but Gussel told him to stop bullshitting and tell the truth. He told Gussel he had pegged him as a muscle-brained airhead, but he was surprised he could catch on quickly. Gusel asked why he decided to betray his friends, and Victor laughed, saying he had no friends and only lived to fight and kill. As he mocked Gusel for being too trusting, Gusel punched him and sent him flying outside the city walls. When Eris got up, he apologized to her and asked her to leave Victor to him before powering up and flying towards him. When he landed in front of him, he said he'd fight him with full strength, and then attacked him. As the two exchanged blows, Victor couldn't hide his excitement at finally finding someone who matched him. He managed to punch Gusel into the side of a large rock, and when he stood up, he asked Victor to use his full strength. Victor happily obliged and powered up, unleashing his hidden muscles, so the two started fighting seriously. However, Gusel seemed to be on the losing end until he started crying, saying that Victor had sad muscles. Suddenly, Victor's muscles began shaking, and as he wondered what was happening, he looked at Gusel and saw him brimming with energy. Gusel charged up and tried to deliver the final blow, but Victor moved out of the way just in time, causing him to miss. Gusel then fell face first into his chest as he called him his friend, which made Victor feel like he'd lost the fight. However, he didn't seem to mind that he had lost, so after propping Gusel against a rock, he left. As he walked away, Judas appeared to him and asked if he lost the fight, which Victor said he did. He also admitted that he didn't mind the fact that he lost, but vowed to win the next time. Judas told him there wouldn't be a next time and created a magic circle, which he used against him. As Victor fell to the floor, Judas revealed that since he didn't care about the Demon Lord's revival, his death would serve as nourishment to him instead and left him alone. Back at the academy, Seiichi tried to use his magical abilities, but he couldn't activate them and wondered what was going on. Days later, Barnabas summoned Seiichi and the girls to his office and revealed that the real reason he invited Seiichi to the academy was because he had anticipated the battle with the Great Devil Order. He'd explained that those who have eaten the fruit of evolution would inevitably cross paths with the Demon Lord. Artoria asked what the fruit had to do with the Demon Lord, so Beatrice explained that in ancient times, when the gods were still creating the world, one of the gods revolted and tried to seize power for himself. This caused a great battle, and most of the land was lost until they sealed the revolting god away, but he cursed the world. The negative emotion took form and grew the fruit of evolution, which spread worldwide. The other gods noticed this and used their powers to suppress its spread, which was why it was now considered a legendary item. Barnabas added that the god who revolted was the Demon Lord, and said those who eat the maximum number of the fruit would become food for the Demon Lord. Lulin then asked Seiichi how many fruits he had eaten, and he told her he'd eaten 10, and Beatrice confirmed that was the limit. However, Barnabas assured him that he'd protect him as that was his duty as the Holy Mage, while adding that he brought him to the academy for that reason. He told Seiichi he didn't have to thank him, but switched to sus mode and asked him to pet his head. Beatrice wasted no time slapping and beating some sense into the shameless old geezer before throwing him out of the room. When he came back, he told them about Destra, the silver-haired boy, who he claimed was created by him. Barnabas explained that Destra was once a student at the academy and his pupil. As he spoke, he remembered how he'd first met Destra and how his lame riddles got the boy mad. Destra had been angry with the gods and blamed them for everything he had lost. Since his family died during the war, Barnabas brought Destra with him and enrolled him in the academy. During his time at the academy, Destra had grown fond of Libera, one of the teachers, who was nice to him. He even gave her a hair clip made from her favorite flowers for her birthday, because she had told him about them. But one day, the academy was attacked by many flaming dragons, and while trying to get to safety, Destra was attacked by a three-headed flaming dog. He fought against it, but his magic wasn't strong enough, so when it tried to strike him, Libera saved him and asked him to run somewhere safe. Destra didn't do as he was told and stood watching her fight until the beast burned her to ashes right before his eyes. Barnabas had found him digging through the rubble, trying to find her, but all that was left was the hair clip. Destra was filled with grief and driven to despair, so when he screamed in anger, he was transported to the same white void Seiichi had gone to. There he met the one-eyed shadow, who told him he'd keep experiencing death and pain because the gods had willed it. Destra got angry and promised to kill all the gods and break the world, so the shadow told him to wish for the power to make everything he touched despair and destroy their souls. The shadow swallowed him, and when Barnabas noticed Destra, he was holding the fruit of evolution, but before he could stop him, Destra ate the fruit. Back in the present, Barnabas blamed himself for everything that happened to Destra, and while he was still speaking, Destra appeared before them. He used his powers to stop them from moving and tried to take Seiichi away. But Barnabas broke free of the enchantment and attacked Destra, who didn't flinch as he fought against him. Barnabas asked what Libera would think if she saw what he had become, which made him angry, so he threw a dark energy ball at him, but Barnabas managed to block it. Destra approached Barnabas and held him by his neck, but Barnabas tried to get him to see the error in his ways. Destra told him to shut up before he used an explosive attack against him, causing Barnabas to fall to the ground lifeless. Destra then called on Judas, who created a magic circle that transported Destra, Seiichi, and Saria to a world made up of accumulated negative emotions. Destra told Seiichi that the power the Demon Lord had given to him was called absolute death, and it cuts whoever it was used against from the circle or reincarnation, which meant that Barnabas was dead and gone forever. He then revealed he was going to use Seiichi's negative energy to resurrect the Demon Lord and kill him completely, which surprised Seiichi, because everyone believed he was on the Demon Lord's side. Destra explained that when he made the deal to become powerful, he also made a promise to kill all the gods, destroy the world, and erase his memories along with himself, so the Demon Lord was no exception. After his explanation, Seiichi drew his swords and prepared to fight, but when he tried using his magic, it didn't work, so he went to challenge Destra using his swords alone. Destra dodged his attacks, but Seiichi kept pushing until Destra sent a powerful slash his way, which he blocked and deflected. Destra was impressed Seiichi could avoid his attacks, but he used the opportunity to stab him, causing him to waste the Christmas ketchup. After Destra stabbed Seiichi, Saria ran and pushed him before going gorilla and punching him into a rock. While Destra got back up, Saria threw punches at him repeatedly, but he caught her fist and used his scythe to slash her body in different places. When he stopped slicing her, he put his weapon away and called her an ugly gorilla before using his power against her. Seiichi screamed and went to her immediately, but there was nothing he could do except hold her, and as he did, Saria told him she was happy to have been his wife before she died in his arms. As he held her crying, Destra approached him, saying Saria was dead because he was too weak and powerless to do anything for her. He said her death was his gift to him, which he called ultimate despair, and asked him to awaken, so he could take his negative energy. Seiichi tried to speak but suddenly screamed in pain as he was surrounded by dark energies. Meanwhile, Judas was in the place where the Demon Lord was sealed, and as Seiichi began screaming, he laughed and said it was time for his lord to resurrect. As Destra watched Seiichi screaming and clutching his chest, he realized that Seiichi would become the Demon Lord himself. When his body was completely taken over, Seiichi found himself in a void that showed clips of his Isekia life and wondered if it was his life flashing before his eyes. He also wondered why he didn't have enough plot armor to live a happy life, but Destra showed up and told him that everything that happened since he came to that world was a lie. He told Seiichi that his former life was his real life, and said that he was an unfortunate soul, who was being punished for things that didn't concern him. He said both of them were the same because everything was taken from them without warning, but his words only made Seiichi's face change. Destra then asked Seiichi if he wanted to destroy the world that made him suffer, and told him to join hands with him so they could do that and take their revenge. In his confused state, Seiichi was going to agree to his plan, but he heard Saria telling him their love was evolving, so he told Destra no. Destra didn't understand what he meant, so he explained that they weren't the same, saying that being bullied and feeling pain made him want to be nice to those around him. He said the pain he felt allowed him to empathize with everyone around him, which made Destra start lashing out. Saria then appeared to Seiichi and told him that his kindness was his greatest power, and asked him not to lose to a little runt like Destra. Seiichi promised to win, so when Destra saw him again, he was glowing, and when the glow stopped, he stood wearing an embarrassing superhero costume. When he raised his head, he looked like he just walked out of a shoujo manga, and even had sparkles around his head. The voice in his head announced the commencement of his true evolution, and to Destra's horror, he began dancing to a song about love like one of Beyonce's backup dancers. As he danced, the fruit of evolution dropped into the soil and sprouted a tree. While in the real world, those who had been killed started coming back to life, and those who were injured were healed immediately. With the resurrection over, the voice announced that the evolution was complete, and Seiichi stood before Destra in his normal clothes with his swords in hand. A confused Destra asked who he was, and he told him that he was the true Seiichi, and the voice said all his statuses had been changed to love. Seiichi dropped his weapons and told Destra to come take his head with his scythe, but Destra said absolute death was enough to do the job. He shot it at Seiichi, but he countered it with a ball of love, which made Destra keep shooting more. But all his efforts were useless because all his attacks were being absorbed by a huge ball of love, even greater than Don's power of family. Annoyed, he brought out his scythe and tried to cut Seiichi, but he kicked him in the face, so he fell to his knees. Destra couldn't understand why Seiichi didn't feel the same despair he had felt, and as he complained about it, Seiichi held his shoulders and told him he could change if he wanted to. He embraced Destra and told him he could be nice to people because both of them were the same. However, Destra smiled and thanked Seiichi before using absolute death on himself. Seiichi tried to use the skill, get better to heal him, but it didn't work, and as he begged him not to disappear, Destra thanked him. He then saw a vision of Libera calling to him and smiling, so he told her he was coming to meet her and turned into a seed which fell into the soil. When it was gone, Seiichi noticed the hairclip he had left behind, and as he looked at it, he heard Surya's voice. When he turned around, he saw her standing there and got to hug her, but as they hugged, she turned into a gorilla and nearly squeezed him to death before kissing his entire face. Seiichi then told her it was time to go home, but as they walked, she lifted him onto her shoulder and asked him to rest. When they returned, they went to Barnabas's office, and there they met the other girls, who were glad to see them. Barnabas then asked about Destra, but Seiichi revealed he didn't make it. Later on, Seiichi and the girls went on a picnic, and as they joked around, Seiichi decided to continue living a happy life with them. Meanwhile, in an unknown location, a mysterious guy resembling Seiichi, but with a more demonic look, sat on a throne. Who do you think the mysterious guy is? Could he be Seiichi's evil doppelganger? Comment Rip Jemple if you want the next part. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you guys in the next video.